Chapter 174. Beiyang University was ranked 912th out of more than 1,000 universities on the Scarlet Sun planet. It would be a bit of an exaggeration to say that it was a third-rate university. To be precise, it was not a first-rate university. In the principal's office of Beiyang University, Yung Byung-ha was introducing the school to Qian Changhai with a smile. The latter was fuming as he listened. He wanted to rush up and beat his old friend to the ground. Yung Byung-ha had only told Qian Changhai that Beiyang University had a long history and had produced many famous people. The school had a deep cultural heritage and was very famous on the Scarlet Sun planet. But when Qian Changhai arrived here, he found that it was not the case at all. The facilities in the school were old and dilapidated, and there were very few students in the school. Along the way, there was almost no one on the narrow and short main campus road. Occasionally, one or two lecturers would pass by. Their breathing was weak and they looked confused. They had not even reached the Qi-gathering realm. Yung Byung-ha and Qian Changhai had joined the army together and fought on the front lines for several years. The two of them could be said to be friends who had gone through life and death situations together. Qian Changhai naturally trusted Yung Byung-ha very much. Who would have thought that this old friend of his would also fool him? Yung Byung-ha's state of mind was completely different from Qian Changhai's. After learning that his old friend was unhappy in Blue Bay Star and had even lost his retirement job, Yung Byung-ha was tempted to let his old friend work at Beiyang University. Yung Byung-ha knew Qian Changhai's character and ability better than anyone else. Beiyang University lacked everything, but what it lacked the most was teachers. There were only a dozen lecturers in the team, and all of them were junior lecturers. Yung Byung-ha was the only professor. When Qian Changhai asked Yung Byung-ha for help, he agreed to all his old friend's requests without hesitation. He only made one request, and that was to let Qian Changhai work at Beiyang University as the dean of the cultivation school. Beiyang University might not be famous, but Yung Byung-ha had some skills. With his ability, there was no need for him to stay in such a university. With his Jin Dan cultivation, it would not be difficult for him to work at a first-rate university. The reason for letting Yung Byung-ha stay at Beiyang University for 20 years was not complicated. This was his alma mater, where he met his wife, and where his dreams began. 20 years ago, his wife, who had been the dean of teaching at Beiyang University, only said one sentence to him before she passed away. If she were to live again, she would still want to meet him under the banyan tree by the May Pond at Beiyang University. Zheng Bingha had done a lot for Beiyang University in the past 20 years. However, the university's student supply had always been poor, and there was no financial allocation. A hero would be stumped by a penny. Over the years, half of the hardware and facilities of Beiyang University had been purchased by Zheng Bingha himself. Yung Byung-ha still had to give lectures and teach students. He wished he could split himself in half. Unfortunately, reality was cruel. Without good conditions, no good lecturers would be willing to work, and talented students would be even less likely to apply. Year after year, it was a vicious cycle. Yung Byung-ha could not do anything, but it was not that he did not have any results. 20 years ago, Beiyang University was almost downgraded to a junior college, but Yung Byung-ha supported this abandoned university bit by bit. From Planet Crimson Sun to the top, it rose by more than 100 places. More than 100 years ago, Beiyang University was ranked in the top 5 on Planet Crimson Sunday. When Yung Byung-ha entered the university, it was also one of the top 10 universities. Of course, that was 80 or 90 years ago. 70 years ago, the principal of Beiyang University was also Zheng Bingha's teacher. Because of his upright and unyielding character, he offended the Deputy Minister of Education of the Fourth Ring Starfield. Since then, Beiyang University began to decline. The territory of the school was constantly shrinking, and the financial allocation was shrinking year by year. Any lecturer who taught at Beiyang University would be put in a difficult position when they took the qualification exam, and their promotion was almost blocked. Many talented students were pulled away by other schools with good treatment. In less than 10 years, Beiyang University rapidly declined on planet Crimson Sun and soon walked out of people's sight. Nowadays, almost no one knew that there was such a former Federation's Project 199 school in Crimson Sun City. Young Byung-ha spoke frankly for half an hour, ignoring his old friend's gloomy and unhappy expression. Brother Chang-hai, this is the basic situation of the university. If you have any questions, you can ask me directly. From tomorrow onwards, you will be the dean of Beiyang University's Cultivation School. You have the final say in all matters of the Cultivation School, and I can't interfere. If there are no questions, you can go to the Human Resources Department to fill in a few forms and go through the admission procedures. Let's have a good drink tonight, Young Byung-ha said with a smile. Qian Chang-hai was seething with anger, but he was already here and all the procedures had been completed. He had already boarded the pirate ship, and it was impossible to get off now. Qian Chang-hai had no interest in being the dean of the Cultivation School at all. The reason he had agreed to Young Byung-ha's appointment was so that Li Daochong could transfer to Beiyang University. It was just that after so long, Young Byung-ha hadn't mentioned a single word about Li Daochong's transfer. All he had talked about was the school situation and the progress of teaching. His attention was completely focused on Qian Chang-hai's appointment. Byung-ha, you know why I'm here this time? Qian Chang-hai saw that Young Byung-ha was about to end the conversation, so he cut to the chase. However, he was interrupted as soon as he spoke. Chang-hai, I've already done what I promised you. This little brother's student status and transfer have already been settled. He can come to school directly tomorrow. After you take up the post, you'll be the dean of the Cultivation School. You can make the arrangements for this little brother as you see fit. There's no need to ask me, Young Byung-ha said straightforwardly. Other than greeting Li Daochong and shaking hands when they first met, Young Byung-ha had completely forgotten about Li Daochong after that and focused all his attention on his old friend. Young Byung-ha wanted Qian Chang-hai. As for Li Daochong, his old friend had merely come over with an additional condition. Li Daochong's situation had already been explained clearly to Young Byung-ha when Qian Chang-hai had contacted him. Young Byung-ha deeply sympathized with Li Daochong's broken spirit root. Other than feeling pity, there was nothing he could do. Without reaching the soul formation stage, it was impossible to repair a broken spirit root. Young Byung-ha even advised Qian Chang-hai not to blame himself. Everyone had their own ups and downs. It could only be said that Li Daochong was destined to suffer this calamity. Young Byung-ha seemed to be relatively cold towards Li Daochong. It wasn't that he looked down on Li Daochong, but that he had too many things on his hands. In any case, Qian Chang-hai was already the dean of the Cultivation School, and he was the one who had brought Li Daochong here. Naturally, he would make the appropriate arrangements, and there was no need for Young Byung-ha to worry about him. After hearing Young Byung-ha's words, Qian Chang-hai finally understood his old friend's intentions. He didn't ask any more questions and brought Li Daochong to complete the procedures. After the procedures were completed, Li Daochong officially became a second-year transfer student at Beiyang University. Qian Chang-hai also became the dean of the Cultivation School of Beiyang University. Qian Chang-hai originally wanted to give Li Daochong some preferential treatment, but Li Daochong refused. Faced with a new environment, Li Daochong's mood immediately became very relaxed. Beiyang University's conditions were far inferior to Xiansan University, but everything here gave Li Daochong a very simple feeling. Chapter 175. It had been 2 months since he came to Beiyang University. Li Daochong's daily life was very regular. He went to class on time in the morning, stayed in the library at noon, practiced basic skills in the training hall in the afternoon, and returned to the dormitory at night. Li Daochong would study the Great Void Sword technique for a while. Before Chu Qinhua left, she told Li Daochong not to cultivate before he reached the Qi gathering stage. Now that Li Daochong was in the middle stage of the Qi gathering stage, he naturally had the conditions to cultivate. However, Li Daochong still did not dare to cultivate, because after he read the Great Void Sword technique, the hot-blooded upgrader incorporated this heaven-level technique into the system. Li Daochong only needed to confirm the cultivation, and this heaven-level technique could be completed in an instant. When he first cultivated the 9 splits saber technique, Li Daochong almost couldn't bear it. The Great Void Sword technique was many times more powerful than the 9 split saber technique. After flipping through it, Li Daochong was fully aware of the power of this cultivation technique. Even the simplest move contained profound mysteries. Li Daochong had not completely cultivated the 9 split saber technique so far. Although the hot-blooded upgrader could let Li Daochong learn it in an instant, there were still limitations. In fact, the 9 split saber technique had a total of 9 saber techniques. After Li Daochong confirmed the cultivation of these 9 saber techniques, he had indeed completed all of them. However, completing the cultivation did not mean that he could perform it. At that time, Li Daochong was only in the Qi refining realm and could only perform the 3rd level. When he was at the peak of the Qi refining realm, he could barely perform the 4th level of the heaven-shattering slash. The 9 split saber technique that Li Daochong obtained was actually not complete. There were only 4 moves recorded on it. At first, Li Daochong only thought that the strongest move of the 9 split saber technique was the 4th level of the heaven-shattering slash. However, when his cultivation broke through the Qi gathering stage and rose to the middle stage of the Qi gathering stage, the 5th level of the saber technique, the star slash slash, and the 6th level of the saber technique, the sun slash slash, surfaced. After the hot-blooded upgrader absorbed the 9 split saber technique, it completed the incomplete parts. There were still 7, 8, and 9 levels left. Li Daochong would only be able to comprehend the 7th layer after leveling up again. According to the rules, Li Daochong would only be able to reach the 9th layer after reaching the early stage of foundation establishment. In other words, the hot-blooded upgrader could complete the incomplete scroll and could also be cultivated in one go. However, if one wanted to display all the mysteries of the cultivation method, one had to be at the same cultivation level. Otherwise, even if one learned it, they would not be able to use it. To put it simply, if you had a rock in your hand, you had to have enough strength to throw it. If you didn't have enough strength, the rock would just stay in your hand. It would just be a rock and could not be used as an offensive weapon. The greater the strength of the throw, the greater the power of the thrown stone. Li Daochong was not in a hurry to learn the Great Void swordsmanship, since he had not finished practicing the 9 crack saber technique. It would not be too late to practice it after he succeeded in Zhuji realm. In the past 2 months, apart from consolidating his cultivation step by step, Li Daochong had also made some new friends. There were only more than 3,000 students at Beiyang University, which was a world of difference compared to Xiansong University's Cultivation College, which had 5,000 to 6,000 students. Beiyang University also had fewer majors. There were only 3 colleges and 1 department, namely the Cultivation College, the Spiritual Brain College, the Spiritual Mechanical Engineering College, and the Refining Department. The Cultivation College had the largest number of students, with a total of 1,580 students in 4 grades. Li Daochong was in Class 2 of the Cultivation College, which was also the only elite class among the 8 classes in the entire grade. Due to the lack of students, Beiyang University did not open a superclass because there were no students of that level. The most powerful in the elite class was only at the 10th level of Qi refinement. In the second year of Xiansong University's elite class, the 10th level of Qi refinement could only be ranked in the lower middle level. However, in Beiyang, the 10th level of Qi refinement was relatively powerful, and their family background was relatively better. It wasn't that there were no rich children in Beiyang University, and there were quite a few of them. About half of the elite class came from good families. They were here for the 2 reference spots of Beiyang University. According to Beiyang University's level, there shouldn't be any spots. However, 15 years ago, Yung Byung-ha was invited to participate in a frontline encirclement and suppression operation and made contributions. The military rewarded him based on his contributions. Yung Byung-ha should have taken this opportunity to leave Beiyang for a better development opportunity, but he gave up on the reward and asked for 2 reference spots in the joint examination of 100 schools and only allowed students from Beiyang University to use them. At that time, The lieutenant general of the Beijiang army thought that there was something wrong with this old man's head, but in the end, he still agreed to Yung Byung-ha's request. This was also the origin of the reference spots that Qian Changhai had mentioned to Li Daochong. It was precisely because of these two spots that the number of applicants for Beiyang University gradually increased. However, due to the weak teaching staff and dilapidated hardware, it was still unable to attract too many students. The main thing was that these two spots didn't directly allow one to enter the finals. It was just a qualification. The joint examination of 100 schools first had to pass the written test, then enter the 10,000 ghost array. The final test was the Bloody Battle Cemetery. For students without strength, the final test was a nightmare. There were no rules, no restrictions, and life and death were up to fate. Riches and honor were up to the heavens. Other than giving up, there was no other way to leave the cemetery. Giving up meant losing the qualification to enter the Big Four. There were only two ways to enter the final test directly. One was to become the first in their cultivation planet, and the other was to participate in the direct test and obtain a direct card. In addition, one could only start with the written test and the 10,000 ghost array. If one couldn't pass it, they wouldn't be able to participate in the final test. The Federation had also put in a lot of effort to cultivate future generals who could resist the Hades. If not for this, how could there be such a peaceful life in the rear? Li Daochong had made a few new friends in the 2 months since he had entered the school. Tan Shuyuan was his desk mate, and Xiahou Quan was his best friend. Tan Shuyuan's family background was not bad. It could be considered a small family on planet Qiyang. This kid had some talent, but he wasn't very talented. The family felt that if he entered a good school, he probably wouldn't even be able to get into the joint examination of 100 schools. They might as well send him to Beiyang University to try his luck. Maybe he could get a spot and qualify for the joint examination of 100 schools. Xiahou Quan's family background wasn't bad, but it couldn't be considered a family. His parents were low-level officials under Planet Qiyang's local government. His father was the deputy mayor of a county, and his mother was the county street clerk. Tan Shuyuan was content with his small fortune. His family had high hopes for him, but he only thought about how to pick up girls all day long and didn't pay much attention to cultivation. With a bit of cleverness and the resources provided by his family, he finally reached the 9th level of Qi refinement. These two kids were always thinking about where to go after school and had no interest in cultivation. Originally, Tan Shuyuan wasn't interested in Li Daochong either. He wasn't a girl. However, a few days later, during the written test, Tan Shuyuan was almost caught cheating. He threw away the cheating slip. Just as the invigilator was about to discover it, Li Daochong stepped on it and narrowly avoided it. After this incident, Tan Shuyuan felt that Li Daochong, this transfer student, was very loyal, so he took the initiative to get close to him. Li Daochong was unfamiliar with this place and needed a friend or two in the form of a guide. Since Tan Shuyuan wanted to be friends with him, he wouldn't reject him. Chapter 176. For more than a month, Tan Shuyuan had invited Li Daochong more than once to go out and have fun, but Li Daochong had declined. However, during this time, Li Daochong's cultivation had been completely consolidated, and after this period of time, the spirit energy had also had an effect on the body's nourishment. Previously, Li Daochong's jade bones had turned into spirit muscles, and his outer skin and inner bones had become spirit bodies, but the flesh and internal organs in the middle had not yet formed. For the past 2 months, every night, Li Daochong only did one thing, and that was to nourish his body with spirit energy and refine his blood and flesh. Normal cultivators had to train their bodies and then use spirit medicine to repair their bodies, and then use a good cultivation method to refine their bodies. Li Daochong did not need to go through so much trouble, and he only needed to nourish his body with spirit energy. As early as a week ago, Li Daochong's blood had been purified into Xian blood, and his organs had gradually entered the strengthening stage. As long as he absorbed enough soul power, Li Daochong could enter the later stage of Qi gathering. In addition, Li Daochong also wanted to accumulate some soul power to exchange for the melted crystal mentioned by old Ghost Zhang, and upgrade the Tsang ink saber again. Li Daocheng was not interested in the two places of Beiyang University. He wanted to participate in the direct test, get the direct card, and directly enter the final test. Qin Shanghai had looked for Li Daocheng several times to ask him to participate in the test of Beiyang University. When the time came, he would be given a place, but Li Daocheng did not sign up. Qin Shanghai thought that Li Daocheng had not come out of the haze of his spirit root shattering, so he did not dare to excessively provoke him. After persuading him a few times, he saw that Li Daocheng did not move, so he could only give up. Li Daocheng didn't understand the situation in Scarlet Sun City at all. He had thought of looking for the clan before, but he felt that it was better not to trouble them. Li Daocheng had already troubled them once for Qiao Shima's matter, and the clan resolved Qiao Shima's matter without a second thought. No matter how powerful the family was, it was still very troublesome to deal with this matter. The Federation absolutely prohibited the sale of immortal herbs. The crime of selling immortal herbs was even more serious than killing cultivators. If caught, there would be a heavy sentence. If the amount exceeded a certain amount, they would be killed without mercy. Li Daocheng was not a person who liked to trouble others, so he did not contact the clan when he arrived at the Scarlet Sun planet. For the past few days, Li Daocheng had been thinking of going to Scarlet Sun City to see if there were any places like the Blue Bay Stars Underground City where he could buy dark ghosts that could erase their soul sense. If he went out, he would be like a headless fly, and it might not even be effective. Li Daocheng was wondering if he should hire a guide on the spirit intranet to take him around when Tan Shuyuan came over to make a fuss. Li Daocheng did not refuse this time and readily agreed. Tan Shuyuan was born and raised in Scarlet Sun City, so he was naturally familiar with the place. Buying dark ghosts was a sensitive matter, so Li Daocheng naturally could not ask Tan Shuyuan directly. He wanted to see if he could indirectly find any clues in the conversation. Li Daocheng had been very low-key in the 2 months since he transferred here. No matter what happened, he would not be in the limelight. There was no need for him to do so either. He would only pass his exams and never score more than 1 mark. Li Daocheng became the person who was ignored, and this was the effect he wanted to achieve. After class, Tan Shuyuan and Xiahou Quan pulled Li Daocheng out of the school gate. It was still early, only a little over 4 o'clock in the afternoon. There was still some time before dinner. Tan Shuyuan drove his flashy convertible flying shuttle and drove Li Daocheng and Xiahou Quan towards the center of Scarlet Sun City. Tan Shuyuan spoke with assurance along the way, introducing Li Daocheng to the scenic spots and history of Scarlet Sun City. Half an hour later, the three of them arrived at a spirit tea house called Chasing Moon in the Scarlet Cloud district of Scarlet Sun City. The important people that Tan Shuyuan had mentioned were already waiting there. However, Li Daocheng had already learned that the important people were actually a group of students with good family backgrounds. They were all Tan Shuyuan's high school classmates. There were both males and females, and all of them were wearing expensive robes. When Tan Shuyuan arrived, they were already there. They were sitting around a table by the window, chatting and laughing as they waited. There were a total of 5 people, 2 males and 3 females. Tan Shuyuan introduced Li Daocheng to everyone as soon as he arrived. However, these 5 young people lost interest in him after sizing up Li Daocheng's attire. One of the girls even looked at Tan Shuyuan with resentment. Why do you bring such a poor kid here? The 2 males were called Cheng Jiahao and Chen Wei. Their family backgrounds were quite good, and they were even better off than Tan Shuyuan. The Cheng family was a mid-tier family in Scarlet Sun City. Their strength was about the same as Zhang Hongya's family in Tianyuan City. Chen Wei was slightly inferior, and his family was in the business of spiritual machinery engineering. The 3 girls were quite good-looking, and they were wearing the most fashionable clothes. They were revealing but not revealing, and they were youthful and beautiful. One of the girls was called Tianmeng. She was a girl that Tan Shuyuan was pursuing recently. Tan Shuyuan was treating them today mainly because of her. The other 2 girls were called Huang Jiaran and Su Rongrong. Their family backgrounds were also quite good. After Tan Shuyuan finished the introductions, he sat beside Tianmeng and began to fawn over her. He did not care about Li Daocheng anymore. Xiaohuan knew this group of people from the beginning, so he naturally communicated with them smoothly. After Li Daochong sat down, no one paid any attention to him. He did not care either. He looked at the busy traffic outside the window and the cultivators on swords flying across the sky from time to time. The Scarlet Sun City was even more prosperous than the Tianyuan City. Although the Scarlet Sun planet was a grade 4 cultivation planet like the Indigo Bay planet, the Scarlet Sun planet was one of the top grade 4 cultivation planets and had the potential to become a grade 3 cultivation planet. At the table, besides Li Daochong, the girl called Huang Jiaran was also silent. Huang Jiaran was the most outstanding one among the three girls. She had clear and bright pupils, curved lumei, long eyelashes, fair skin, and a cold face. When Li Daochong saw Huang Jiaran for the first time, she reminded him of his master, Chu Qianhua. The two women didn't have any similarities in appearance, but their expressions were somewhat similar. Chu Qianhua also always had this ice-cold appearance. Of course, there was a difference between Huang Jiaran and Chu Qianhua's coldness. Li Daochong did not care about Huang Jiaran at first. Li Daochong was not interested in whether she talked or thought about anything. However, after sitting down for a few minutes, Li Daochong faintly felt a trace of yin hell qi. It was very weak. Even though Li Daochong was very sensitive to death qi, it took him a long time to feel it. Li Daochong looked at Huang Jiaran in the direction of the death qi. Then he shrouded her with his psyche power. Li Daochong frowned. Black resentment, binding spirit? Red Sun Planet produced this thing? After probing, Li Daochong found that the black resentment binding spirit in Huang Jiaran's body had just been possessed for less than 3 months. Seeing Li Daochong staring at Huang Jiaran, Xiao Quan leaned closer and whispered, Daochong, although Huang Jiaran is beautiful, don't think too much. She is not someone you can touch. The strongest family here is the Huang family. Not only that, Huang Jiaran has many pursuers. Tan Xuan is a guy who drools when he sees a beauty, but he is very honest in front of Huang Jiaran. Jin Wensheng, who will come later, is Huang Jiaran's loyal pursuer. Not to mention the Jin family's strength. Jin Wensheng is an expert in the qi-gathering realm. Don't provoke him. Li Daochong continued to look at Huang Jiaran, as if he did not hear Xiao Quan's words. As soon as Xiao Quan finished speaking, he said, Miss Huang, have you been feeling cold recently? Have you been unable to concentrate during meditation? In fact, when the black resentment binding spirit possessed a person, there was no uniform symptom. Everyone was different. Otherwise, it would be easy to be discovered. Li Daochong knew about it because he checked Huang Jiaran's pulse with his psyche power. As soon as Li Daochong finished speaking, the table of people who were talking and laughing suddenly stopped. They all looked at Li Daochong with strange expressions. Su Rongrong and the others looked like they were waiting to watch a good show. They knew Huang Jiaran's personality too well. Even Jin Wensheng, who was so well off, was often bored, let alone a poor boy. A toad lusting after a swan's meat. He must be crazy. Moreover, he could even say such a vulgar thing. It was simply laughable. How did you know? Huang Jiaran retracted her gaze from the window and looked at Li Daochong with surprise in her eyes. Chapter 177. Huang Jiaran stared at Li Daochong. This was the first time she had looked at him since Li Daochong had arrived. Huang Jiaran did not look down on Li Daochong because of his shabby clothes. She was indifferent by nature, even more so when it came to the opposite sex. If not for her good friend, Su Rongrong, forcing her to come today, she would not have come. Once she heard that Jin Wensheng was coming, Huang Jiaran would frown unnaturally. Jin Wensheng's pursuit of her was getting more and more intense. Huang Jiaran dreamed of becoming a 5-star spiritualist. What was a spiritualist? Simply put, it was a singer on earth. Huang Jiaran focused all her attention on her studies and was not interested in anything else. However, in recent months, Huang Jiaran felt that something was wrong with her body. When she went to the hospital for a checkup, the doctor said that there was no problem. Huang Jiaran did not care at first, but as time went by, she began to have problems even when she was cultivating. She could not concentrate during meditation. Huang Jiran did not mention this to anyone. She went to the hospital alone for a checkup. Therefore, when Li Daocheng hit the nail on the head, Huang Jiran could not help but be surprised. She could not help but be curious about this young man in front of her. How'd he know? Aside from Li Daocheng, the rest of the people at the table were all too familiar with Huang Jiran, this cold beauty's personality. She was an otherworldly woman. Not to mention men, even women would find it difficult to talk to her, let alone be stared at by Huang Jiran. Huang Jiran would never stare at a man. However, at this moment, this cold beauty was staring at Li Daocheng. Everyone at the table was surprised. Su Rongrong asked curiously, "Jiran, what's wrong? Are you not feeling well recently?" Huang Jiran was still staring at Li Daocheng. She did not answer Su Rongrong's question. Then she stood up, walked to Li Daocheng, and reached out to pull him up. Tan Xiyin looked at Li Daocheng with his mouth agape. He thought, what kind of magic did this guy use to make goddess Huang Jiran pull him up? Tan Xiyin could not understand. Cheng Jiahao and Chen Wei were even more confused. Su Rongrong and Tian Ming were even more incredulous. One had to know that Jin Wensheng was a handsome young master with a good family background. Huang Jiran did not even look him in the eye. How? With this poor guy, with just a few words, he seems to know the problem. We'll be back. Right. After saying that, Huang Jiran pulled Li Daocheng upstairs. There was a large flat balcony on the second floor. One could drink tea in the open air. But at this time, there were very few people drinking tea. There was no one on the balcony. The reason why Huang Jiran was so anxious was that her body's problem had spread to her throat. When she sang, her voice would become hoarse. These days, in addition to the regular hospitals, she also went to the ancient medical clinics. They also could not diagnose her. No one could say it was right, but this young man could tell the symptoms just by looking at her. Her throat was Huang Jiran's lifeblood. How could she not be anxious? Because of this, Huang Jiran did not care about anything else. She pulled Li Daocheng and ran. Just as they were going upstairs, a young man wearing a cloud jade robe came in. He saw Huang Jiran pulling a man up to the second floor. The young man was Jin Wensheng, who had been pursuing Huang Jiran for a year. This scene made him seethe with anger. He wanted to kill the man who was being pulled by Huang Jiran. But he knew Huang Jiran's personality very well. Naturally, he would not do such a rude thing in front of her. Jin Wensheng walked to the table with a gloomy face and sat down. The others did not dare to speak. Su Rongrong and Tian Ming knew Jin Wensheng's personality too well. At this time, it was best not to provoke him, or they would get into trouble. Tan Shiyuan and Xiahou Quan looked at each other and didn't dare to say anything. However, they began to feel nervous. Jin Wensheng was famous for being jealous. He would definitely ask who Huang Jiran had pulled just now. If he knew that it was them who had brought Huang Jiran here, they didn't dare to imagine whether Jin Wensheng would vent his anger on them. At this time, Tan Shiyuan's intestines were green with regret. Was there something wrong with his brain today? Why did he think of dragging Li Daocheng here? At this time, on the platform on the second floor, Li Daocheng said a very mysterious explanation. Huang Jiran listened in confusion. He only knew that he should have some kind of chronic disease. If it was not treated in time, as time passed, his body would only get worse and worse, and his cultivation would also fall. Huang Jiran was frightened. How do you know so much about this strange disease? You know how to treat it? Li Daocheng was not a person who liked to meddle in other people's business. Everyone had their own fate. But the girl in front of him reminded him of Chu Qingyue, which made Li Daocheng involuntarily want to help her. Li Daocheng was silent for a while and said, "My family has been practicing medicine for generations. Although it is not an aristocratic family, we have done a lot of research on ancient medicine. My grandfather left behind a medical record. When I saw you, I guessed that you had this disease. But you don't have to panic. Your disease is not very serious. I only need to use ancient medicine to cure you." Really? Huang Jiran could not believe it. Really? Give me your hand. Li Daocheng stretched out his hand. Huang Jiran did not hesitate and directly stretched out her crystal-clear white slender hand. Li Daocheng took advantage of the opportunity to hold her hand. When Huang Jiaran and Li Daocheng's hands touched, Huang Jiaran's face turned red. She wanted to withdraw her hand, but she resisted and did not move. Just a second later, Huang Jiaran's face turned red and was replaced by a touch of surprise. A warm qi flowed into Huang Jiaran's body. After a while, the indescribable chill in her body immediately disappeared. Li Daocheng was able to destroy the black resentment binding spirit when he was in the third level of qi refining. Now that he was in the middle stage of qi gathering, the black resentment binding spirit was like an ant. Although it could be cured in an instant, Li Daocheng still delayed for a while. Otherwise, it would be too fake. He let his spiritual qi go around Huang Jiaran's body and repaired all the damage caused by the cold qi. Puff! Huang Jiaran spat out a mouthful of black water and immediately felt much better. When Li Daocheng let go of Huang Jiaran's hand, the latter gratefully asked, "Thank you. How much is the treatment fee?" Li Daocheng waved his hand and said, "Your expression is very similar to an old friend of mine. The treatment fee is waived." After saying that, Li Daocheng turned around and went downstairs. Huang Jiaran stared at Li Daocheng's back. Her cherry-red lips pursed. She could not help but feel a little embarrassed. Li Daocheng's words made Huang Jiaran's thoughts a little crooked. There were too many people who pursued her. Li Daocheng's words just now were also similar to what Li Daocheng had said. This made her mistakenly think that Li Daocheng also wanted to win her favor. Huang Jiaran suddenly felt a bit of pressure in her heart. After all, the situation was different from other pursuers. If she still ignored him, wouldn't she be suspected of being ungrateful? Li Daocheng naturally did not know what Huang Jiaran was thinking. He helped Huang Jiaran because he remembered Chu Qianhua. As for what Huang Jiaran looked like, he had already forgotten. After Li Daocheng went downstairs, he returned to his seat. Huang Jiaran also followed him downstairs. But the atmosphere at the table was a little strange. Li Daocheng had just sat down when Jin Wensheng asked with a smile, "Who is this friend? Does anyone know?" Chapter 178. Of course, Jin Wensheng asked this on purpose. Among the people at the table, only Li Daocheng was dressed shabbily. Even the worst of the others were wearing Red Sun Planet's branded robes that cost at least tens of thousands of dollars. Li Daocheng's clothes couldn't be more ordinary. It was a very simple training suit without any spirit energy or spirit array fluctuations. The material was just a little elastic and tough. It could be bought at the night market for no more than 500 Federation coins. Foreigner? Which cultivation planet? Jin Wensheng continued to ask. Quicksand planet, Cheng Jiahao replied with a bit of sarcasm. When Li Daocheng entered the school, there was a slight change to his information. Qian Shanghai did this to protect Li Daocheng. He didn't want the Zhao family and Qiu Xiong to know about Li Daocheng's specific whereabouts. Of course, the most important thing was to avoid the deputy director of the education department, Yu Boming, and the assistant director of the education department, Su Yuliang. If these two people knew about Li Daocheng's specific whereabouts, they might secretly obstruct him. Qian Shanghai knew this very well. Qian Shanghai paid the price of a drop of Yang essence liquid. This was a precious drop of spirit liquid that he won from his old rival. He was going to save it for when he went to 13 Spectre. However, in order to help Li Daocheng settle down, the old man was willing to pay the price. This kind of slight change to the information that didn't violate the Federation's laws was something that many people were willing to do as long as they were willing to pay. Li Daocheng's birthplace was changed to Quicksand Planet, a fifth-class cultivation planet outside the fifth ring of the Federation star field. Quicksand Planet? Jin Wensheng was stunned for a moment. He had never heard of this place. Cheng Jiahao leaned close to Jin Wensheng's ear and whispered a few words. The latter nodded with a very surprised expression. At first, Jin Wensheng thought that one couldn't judge a book by its cover. He had experienced many things since he was young and had met many experts. Therefore, Jin Wensheng knew that he shouldn't underestimate anyone. Even if he was angry, he had to ask about the other party's background. Jin Wensheng knew Huang Jiaran's character very well. Therefore, when she pulled a man upstairs, besides feeling jealous, his first reaction was that this person wasn't simple. However, after a few questions, the doubts in Jean Wenqing's heart dissipated, and his gloomy expression turned bright and clear. A fifth-class cultivation planet kid wanted to snatch Jean Wenqing's woman? It's a little funny. Tian Ming was a little woman who wanted to curry favor with the rich and powerful. She wanted to curry favor with Jean Wenqing so badly that she wanted to devote her life to him. Moreover, she could give up her status. Unfortunately, in Jean Wenqing's eyes, she was just a piece of trash. However, Tian Ming would still try her best to please Jean Wenqing whenever she had the chance. She said in a sarcastic tone, "Tan Xuan, why did you bring just anyone? Don't you know that today is a high-end party?" Tan Xuan wanted to seal Tian Ming's mouth, but he couldn't control her. He could only look at Li Daochong apologetically, telling him not to be angry. Li Daochong wouldn't argue with a snobbish little girl. He didn't care about Tian Ming's words at all. Li Daochong's heart was only focused on cultivation. Nothing else could stir up his emotions. Li Daochong recently found that his cultivation speed could be increased by another level. As long as he had enough soul power, he could reach the peak of qi gathering stage without any obstacles. In Li Daochong's eyes, the group of people were just a bunch of kids. His purpose here was just to walk around and have a better understanding of Scarlet Sun City. The strongest one was Jean Wenqing, who had just entered the early stage of qi gathering stage. Moreover, he was older than Li Daochong. There was no need to talk about the others. Cheng Jiahao was at qi refining stage 10. Chen Wei was at qi refining stage 9. They were weaker than Tan Shuyuan. There was no need to talk about the cultivation of the girls. The strongest one was Huang Jiran, who was at qi refining stage 11. However, she was not a combat cultivator. She was a sound cultivator. In Li Daochong's eyes, these people were just a bunch of mortals. Perhaps Li Daochong's cultivation was not that terrifying, as he was only at the middle stage of the qi gathering realm, which was only one stage higher than Jean Wenqing. However, Li Daochong's strength was far beyond the middle stage of qi gathering stage. Even a peak stage, qi gathering stage, cultivator might not be enough in front of Li Daochong. The strength of one's cultivation didn't determine one's strength. Perhaps in most cases, the stronger one's cultivation was, the stronger one's strength. However, this wasn't an iron law. If one's cultivation was weak, but their strength was strong, this was the true terror. Whether Li Daochong was a genius or not, he didn't know. However, after obtaining the hot-blooded level-up tool, any genius would not be surprising in his eyes. In Li Daochong's eyes, Tian Ming wasn't worth mentioning. If it weren't for Tan Shuyuan's face, he would have already punished her with a telekinesis attack. Ming, don't be so impolite. How can you speak like that? While the others were waiting to see how Li Daochong would react, Huang Jiran's displeased expression was heard. The people at the table were stunned once again. What was wrong with Huang Jiran today? Jean Wenqing's originally relaxed expression flashed with a sinister expression. Huang Jiran had never defended him before. Today, she actually spoke out to defend a brat from the countryside. Tian Ming pursed her lips and didn't say anything. She didn't dare to have a conflict with Huang Jiran, not to mention the Huang clan's strength. Once Jean Wenqing acted up, no one would be able to stop him. He might even slap her on the spot. Seeing that the atmosphere wasn't right, Tan Xuan braced himself and said, "It's getting late. Let's go to the hotel. Pure Gold Hotel, room 309. It's not too far from here." After speaking, Tan Shuyuan stood up. However, even though he stood up, the others remained seated. Clearly, his influence was far from enough. Tan Shuyuan wanted to cry, but had no tears. Just as he didn't know what to do, Huang Jiran stood up. Almost at the same time, Li Daochong also stood up. This tacit understanding was as if they had made an appointment. Jean Wenqing's lungs were about to explode from anger. However, with a beauty in front of him, he couldn't lose his temper. Jean Wenqing still had this bit of patience. He smiled slightly and stood up gracefully. "I'm hungry too. Let's go." As soon as Jean Wenqing spoke, the others immediately stood up and walked out of the tea house. Tan Shuyuan's worried face finally calmed down. He whispered to Li Daochong, "Daochong, don't take Tian Meng's words to heart. This girl is used to being arrogant since she was young. She doesn't think before she speaks. Don't take it to heart. Women have long hair, but short knowledge. If she speaks nonsense again during dinner later, watch how I'll deal with her." Li Daochong didn't have a good impression of this group of people. He planned to tell Tan Shuyuan that he would leave first and walk around by himself. He wouldn't go for dinner so as to avoid making things difficult for him. After Tan Shuyuan said that, Li Daochong didn't know what to say. Pure Gold Hotel was one of the top hotels in Qiyang City. Even with Tan Shuyuan's ability, it was still painful for him to book a private room here. When they arrived at the hotel, the awkward atmosphere eased a little. However, everyone seemed to have a tacit understanding to ignore Li Daochong. They were afraid of offending Jin Wensheng. After entering the private room, Jin Wensheng frowned. "Chuan, what kind of lousy private room did you book? This is a low-end private room for individual customers. Follow me to the 5th floor. I'm a member here." After Jin Wensheng said that, Tan Shuyuan was worried. The 3rd floor was the limit of what he could afford. Any higher, and he wouldn't be able to afford it. "Shuyuan, you could treat us another day. I'll be the host tonight." Jin Wensheng glanced at Huang Jiran inadvertently as he spoke. Tan Shuyuan heaved a sigh of relief. When they reached the 5th floor, a man in a suit immediately came up to them. He nodded and bowed to Jin Wensheng and brought them into a private room. Once they entered, Tian Meng let out a gasp of surprise. This wasn't a private room. It was a magnificent palace. "Young Master Jin, you're a member here?" Tian Meng exclaimed. Su Rongrong rolled her eyes at Tian Meng. "Don't be surprised. Young Master Jin has always been a gold member of Pure Gold Hotel." Chapter 179. Li Daochong was amused by Jin Wensheng's look, but his expression didn't change. He turned a blind eye to the magnificent private room. He came because of Tan Shuyuan and Huang Jiran. When they left the tea house, Huang Jiran also apologized to Li Daochong and asked him not to bicker with Tian Meng. With the improvement of his cultivation and strength, Li Daochong's temperament had changed significantly. It was not an exaggeration to say that his heart was as still as water. After entering the private room, everyone sat down. Jin Wensheng sat in the main seat. Huang Jiran was arranged to sit on his left. Cheng Jiahao sat on his right. The others sat in rows. Almost no one showed any interest in Li Daochong. It was only after Tan Shuyuan pulled him to sit down. Tan Shuyuan's actions made Li Daochong's impression of this kid increase a lot. Although this kid was not ambitious and loved to play, he didn't dislike Li Daochong in this situation. He was a friend that could only be made. Li Daochong knew that Tan Shuyuan's treatment of him might offend Jin Wensheng and the others, but he didn't care. Tan Shuyuan's performance today was enough to make Li Daochong a friend. After a while, exquisite dishes made of various spirit beasts and spirit herbs were served. Several bottles of expensive red fruit spirit wine were opened, and the rich fragrance immediately filled the entire private room. Looking at the table full of spirit dishes, Tian Meng's eyes lit up. "Wow, isn't that red flame flood dragon meat?" Jin Wensheng smiled and said, "Meng Meng has good eyesight. It is red flame flood dragon meat. Eating a piece has the effect of strengthening the body. Long-term consumption is very helpful for cultivation and can strengthen the body." The table full of people drooled as they looked at the table full of dishes. Jin Wensheng raised his cup and said a few words, and the others couldn't wait to start eating. While the others were chatting and laughing, Li Daochong didn't say a word and just ate. It would be a waste not to eat. Li Daochong didn't care about Jin Wensheng's attitude towards him, and he wouldn't refuse to eat just because it was Jin Wensheng's treat. In the eyes of the others, Li Daochong's behavior was like a country bumpkin who had just entered the city. Seeing so many spiritual vegetables, he couldn't wait to eat and drink and pack them up. When Jin Wensheng saw Li Daochong acting like this, he was overjoyed. "Country bumpkin, you should continue acting so that Ran can see your true colors." After a few cups of wine, everyone was in high spirits. At this time, a charming woman wearing a fiery red robe came in from outside. When Jin Wencheng saw her, he hurriedly stood up and introduced her to everyone. This woman was the general manager of the Pure Gold Hotel, Rinlan. The outside world called her Sister Lan, and she was also an influential figure in Scarlet Sun City. Sister Lan personally came to propose a toast, so Jin Wencheng naturally felt honored. He drank 3 glasses in a row, and the others all followed suit. Only Li Daocheng just showed a little bit of respect and continued to eat. After a round of toasting, 3 bottles of red spirit wine were gone just like that. They were worth at least 20,000 Federation coins. After Sister Lan left, Cheng Jiahao's face was flushed red, and he said excitedly, "Brother Jin, thanks to you, I was able to meet this Scarlet Sun City's famous lady. I heard that Sister Lan has a strong background, and she is the woman of Scarlet Sun City's big boss, Boss Ian. The outside world also heard that Boss E is one of the 2 tigers of Scarlet Sun City's underground forces, and the other is the Shadow Secluded Square. In Haoqiang, my family ran into some trouble last year. I asked someone to find Boss Yin's top fighter, Brother Liao's underling, Wild Dog, and it was easily settled. Boss Yin's influence is not only in Scarlet Sun City, but 1/3 of the entire Scarlet Sun planet's underground forces are under his control. I heard that his backing is one of the 4 big families, the Yin family," Chen Wei said with a shocked face. When it came to legendary figures, this group of family's disciples were very interested. They were only disciples of small or medium-sized families, and they were far inferior compared to a big boss like Yin Haoqiang, who had connections with the 4 big families. "Brother Jin, you're still the one with face. Even someone like Sister Lan obediently came to toast you. Your Jin family has been developing rapidly these past few years, and it seems that it has the momentum to become a big family. Brother Jin, you must take care of us friends in the future." Tianming never forgot to praise Jin Wencheng, so as to attract his attention. At this time, Jin Wencheng was very happy when he heard these words. He felt that this girl Tianming was really sensible. He nodded with a smile, and he did not forget to look at Li Daocheng, who was only focused on eating. "Li Daocheng, don't just focus on eating. Tell us, what is the difference between these dishes and your quicksand stars?" Jin Wencheng saw that it was about time to lay the groundwork. Today, no matter what, he had to make a fool of this hothead in front of Huang Jiran. "There is no difference," Li Daocheng replied with a grumble. "Ha! Brother Jin, quicksand star is so awesome. Our Scarlet Sun star can't compare. It is said that they can't even grow spirit rice there. They usually eat sandstone lizard meat, which we don't have in our Scarlet Sun star." Chen Wei sneered. "Sandstone lizard meat is very good. It is said that it tastes like chewing wax, and you need to use a lot of strength to eat it. Li Daocheng's table manners should be the result of years of habit." Cheng Jiahao also ridiculed. "Li Daocheng, don't you think that your table manners are very similar to a starving person of Quicksand Star?" Jin Wencheng smiled and said, "Oh no, not like a starving person, more like a sand pig." Everyone at the table burst into laughter. Only Huang Jiran frowned. Asterisk Pa. Asterisk Li Daocheng put down his chopsticks, raised his head, and glanced at Jin Wencheng indifferently. These 3 fellows were singing the same tune, and the more they spoke, the more outrageous they became. They had even started to attack him personally. Li Daocheng did not provoke others, but if others took the initiative to provoke him, he would not be afraid. At most, he would fall out with them. However, after glancing at Tan Shuyuan's crying face, Li Daocheng did not flare up. Since they could not get along well, he got up and prepared to leave. "Have you guys said enough? Is there anyone who treats their guests like this?" Huang Jiran's face was cold. He looked at Li Daocheng apologetically and said, "Li Daocheng, don't worry about them. Eat your food." Jin Wencheng felt as if he had been punched in the heart, but he could only endure it. He did not dare to do anything to Huang Jiran. Seeing that Huang Jiran was about to flip out, the few of them did not dare to mock Li Daocheng anymore. Cheng Jiahao quickly raised his glass. Come. Thank you for your hospitality, Brother Jin. I'll drink first as a toast." Very quickly, The atmosphere at the table became lively again. Li Daochong did not intend to stay any longer. He bid farewell to Tan Shiyuan and was about to leave. Tan Shiyuan wanted to ask him to stay, but he did not know how to do so. He could only apologize. Daochong, it's my fault today. I should not have brought you here. Li Daochong smiled indifferently. It's okay. You have good intentions. After saying that, Li Daochong got up and left. As for Jin Wensheng and the others, he did not even look at them. What a joke. So uncultured. A country bumpkin will always be a country bumpkin. He has no self-restraint at all. Brother Jin is treating, and he left without even saying goodbye. Tianming immediately said. Jin Wensheng glanced at Huang Jiran and revealed an expression that said, "Now you know what kind of person he is." However, Huang Jiran suddenly stood up. Li Daochong, I'll send you off. Everyone at the table was shocked again. Huang Jiran ignored them and jogged forward, following Li Daochong out of the private room. You don't have to send me off. Go back. Li Daochong did not look sideways as he walked, and said indifferently, No, I have to go back too. Thank you for treating me today. Huang Jiran said apologetically with a sincere face. Li Daochong did not reply and went downstairs. Since Huang Jiran did not want to stay, he did not have to say anything more. Just as the two of them were about to go downstairs together, a muffled sound came from behind them. They turned around and saw Tan Shiyuan kicking a fat man to the ground. Chapter 180. After Li Daochong and Huang Jiran left the room, Jin Wensheng was furious. He immediately sent a message to Tianming, asking her to follow them. Tianming couldn't wait to do something for Jin Wensheng. She immediately used the excuse of going to the toilet to drag Su Rongrong along. Tan Shiyuan was eager to chase after a girl, so he followed them out. Tianming was so eager to get things done that she almost rushed out of the room. As a result, she bumped into a drunk fat man. The fat man saw that the girl was pretty, so he held her up. His fat hand immediately grabbed Tianming's butt. Tianming was so scared that she forgot to scream. The fat man was tall and much stronger than Tianming. Tan Shiyuan went out and saw this scene. He was so angry that he rushed up to Tianming and kicked the fat man in the stomach. The fat man was a businessman. He was only in the 5th level of qi refining. How could he withstand Tan Shiyuan's kick? He fell flat on his face. His mouth was full of blood, and one of his teeth was missing. Little bastard, how dare you hit me? Do you know who I am? The fat man was sober after the fall. He sat on the ground and howled. I'm hitting you, you stupid pig. I don't care who you are. Tan Shiyuan raised his foot to kick the fat man again. Bang! Before Tan Shiyuan could finish his words, he had just raised his leg when an iron fist came up and landed heavily on his face. Tan Shiyuan staggered and bumped into the door frame. The door frame couldn't hurt him as he was in the 9th level of qi refining. However, his cheek was hit so hard that his front teeth were knocked out. His mouth was full of blood. Bastard, you've got guts. You even dare to hit President Xiao. I think you're tired of living. A fierce voice came from his side. Tan Shiyuan just realized that the fat man had a companion. The man had a buzz cut and bulging muscles. There was a tattoo of a python on his exposed arm. The ferocious snake head was sticking out its tongue. There were 2 big men behind the man. Their breath was not weak. Tan Shiyuan's cultivation was not good enough, so he couldn't sense their strength. However, he could see that the 3 of them were not weak. They seemed to be body cultivators. Cultivators were divided into 3 types: body refiners, qi refiners, and cultivators. The difference between the 3 types was that the first type was body refiners and not qi refiners. They only sought to achieve rapid success, which meant that their combat power was extremely strong. Body refiners in the qi refiner stage were the strongest. The second type was qi refinement, but not body refinement. They used qi to enter the Tao, studied spells, and focused on a certain field. Their combat strength was the weakest in the early stages. The third type was body refinement and qi refinement. Their goal was foundation establishment. Most of them had 5 spirit meridians or more. Many people knew that they had no hope of reaching the Foundation establishment stage in the future, so it was better to cultivate their bodies instead of their chi. They pursued actual combat strength and took the lead among ordinary people. They were incomparably powerful, and these people were also known as martial artists. In a moment of impulse, Tan Shiyuan had offended someone he should not have offended. That punch from the other party had caused him to feel deep fear in his heart, and he had also sobered up by half. Tianming and Su Rongrong were scared out of their wits. They had never seen such a scene. They had grown up in a greenhouse and lived like princes. To them, cultivation was simply a thankless task. No matter how good one's cultivation was, it was not as good as marrying well in the future. Tianming winked at Su Rongrong, and the latter immediately went back into the private room to call for help. Jin Wensheng and the others heard the noise and felt that something was wrong. At this time, they had already stood up and were about to come out. Seeing Su Rongrong come in, Cheng Jiahao asked, "What's going on outside?" Su Rongrong said anxiously, Tianming was molested. Tan Shiyuan fought with the other party. When Chen Wei heard this, he immediately felt the effects of alcohol. His face was red as he cursed. "Damn it! Which bastard dares to touch my brother? I'll twist his head off." Xiahou Quan rushed out without saying a word. Only Jin Wensheng frowned slightly. This was the gold member hall on the 5th floor of the Pure Gold Hotel. Those who could come here were either rich or noble. How could ordinary people come here? But everyone was filled with righteous indignation, and Jin Wensheng could not shrink back. Moreover, several people present were looking at him as if they were following his lead. Jin Wensheng had to puff out his chest and follow Xiahou Quan out. "Wild dog, kill this guy for me." After being helped up by two big men, the fat man pointed at Tan Xuan and said fiercely, "President Xiao, don't worry. I, Wild Dog, will help you vent your anger. You are our boss's distinguished guest. How can we let you suffer? Beat him." The tattooed man called Wild Dog waved his hand and ordered. The two big men put down President Xiao and rushed up to beat him. At this time, a roar came from the private room behind. "Damn it! Which bastard dares to touch my brother? I'll twist his head off." It was Chen Wei who shouted because he was drunk. Then the door of the private room was pushed open. Xiahou Quan was the first to rush out and hold Tan Xuan, followed by Jin Wensheng. Chen Wei was the third to rush out with the smell of alcohol. He looked like he was going to fight. However, as soon as Chen Wei came out, before he finished shouting, he shuddered. He knew the man outside the door. It was Brother Liao's underling, Wild Dog, who was hired by his family to help last year. This guy's cultivation was not high, but he was a body cultivator. He was not only good at fighting, but also the kind that didn't care about his life. "Whose head are you going to twist?" Wild Dog lit a cigarette and looked at Chen Wei with a smile. "Oh, no, I twisted my own head." Chen Wei's legs went soft when he saw Wild Dog. Last year, he saw Wild Dog cripple another gang leader's leg. Wild Dog even cheered as he beat him. That neurotic voice was still echoing in Chen Wei's ears. Tianming and Su Rongrong looked at Chen Wei in shock. This guy was so arrogant in the private room just a second ago, but he was scared the moment he came out. What was going on? "Chen Wei, who is this?" Jin Wensheng saw Chen Wei trembling with fear and knew something was wrong. He asked tentatively, "He is..." Chen Wei was about to speak, but was interrupted by Wild Dog. "Ah, who am I? You'll know in a moment." Wild Dog laughed heartily, then pressed his wrist. The door of the innermost private room opened immediately, and a group of fierce-looking gangsters rushed out. There were more than 10 of them. "President Xiao, I'll take these bastards in the private room first. You can do whatever you want with them." Wild Dog smiled and said to President Xiao, who was wiping the blood from his mouth, "Take them into the private room together." The gangsters were about to make a move. Jin Wensheng knew something was wrong and was about to admit defeat. He had already sent a message to Sister Lan, asking her to come out and help. Jin Wensheng was about to speak when he saw Huang Jiran and Li Daocheng coming back from the end of the corridor. Jin Wensheng braced himself and changed his words. "Friend, please do me a favor. I'm from the Jin family in Qiyang City. It's our fault for starting the fight. We can compensate for the medical expenses." The Jean family that deals in spiritual wood? Wild Dog raised his hand to stop the gangsters and asked. Yes. Jean Wunsheng answered. Oh, the head of the Jean family, Jean Deju, is a friend of mine. For his sake, I won't arrest you. You can go into the private room yourselves. Wild Dog said as if he was giving them face. However, the viciousness in his eyes did not diminish. The gangsters moved aside to make a path. The others looked at Jean Wunsheng. Chen Wei heard Wild Dog say that he knew the head of the Jean family and was relieved. Jean Deju had some prestige in Qiyang City. At this time, Li Daochong and Huang Jiran came back. Su Rongrong kept winking at Huang Jiran, telling her not to come over. Qiu Yuan, are you okay? Li Daochong came over and checked Tan Qiu Yuan's face. Chapter 181. Since Wild Dog knew the head of the Jean clan, Jean Wunsheng's heart calmed down. In front of Huang Jiran, there was no way he would back down. He puffed out his chest and walked towards the private room first. No one else dared to say anything. They all followed Jean Wunsheng into the private room. The 2 rows of gangsters lined up on both sides of the room, each with a fierce look on their faces. Li Daochong accompanied Tan Shuyuan into the private room. Tan Shuyuan regretted his recklessness, but it was too late. Huang Jiran followed behind Li Daochong. When the fatty saw Huang Jiran, his small eyes flashed with greed. After entering the private room, Jean Wunsheng suddenly felt that something was wrong. This private room was 1 level higher than the other private rooms. There were only 3 people sitting at a large round table. One of them was Sister Lan, who had just toasted them. Sitting at the head of the table was a middle-aged man dressed in ancient robes. There was a hideous scar on his face like a large centipede. He looked exceptionally fierce. Beside the middle-aged man sat a long-haired youth. He didn't look special, but his eyes were as sharp as an eagle's. When Chen Wei entered, he almost collapsed to the ground. After Jean Wunsheng and the rest entered, Wild Dog followed by the fatty, Director Chiu. More than a dozen thugs followed in one after another. The last thug who came in casually closed the door and locked it. This action made Jean Wunsheng's heart skip a beat. The corner of his eyes twitched. However, he was still relatively calm. Seeing that Sister Lan was here, he felt that this matter could be discussed. Wild Dog walked to the middle-aged man's side. The viciousness on his face disappeared. He called out respectfully, "Third Masterine, these brats beat up Director Chiu." Jean Wunsheng's expression froze. Chen Wei leaned against the wall and almost couldn't stand straight. He recognized this famous person the moment he entered. Bossine was a title that was added to the outside world. People in the industry called him Third Masterine. Director Chiu covered his mouth and sat down beside the long-haired youth. He said gloomily, "Third Masterine, I didn't expect to encounter such a thing on my first visit to Planet Scarlet Sunday, bullying an outsider like me." Third Master Yin's face was cold. President Xiao was his esteemed guest who had come from Kangwu Planet to investigate the market. Third Master Yin might be able to call the wind and summon the rain on Planet Crimson Sun, but he couldn't do so in other places, not to mention Planet Songwu, the #1 cultivation planet in the 4th ring starfield. It wasn't easy for Third Master Yin to invite President Xiao over. He was in charge of the silver business on Kangwu Planet. Pan silver was an extremely important resource for cultivation. Shuttles, magical equipment, and all kinds of spiritual machinery could not be separated from Pan silver. This kind of metal was equivalent to the steel on Earth. Third Master Yin needed to sell the silver from Planet Crimson Sun to Planet Kangwu through President Xiao. The appetite of a second-grade cultivation planet was like a prehistoric giant dragon. It was unknown how many times more than a 4th-grade cultivation planet. President Xiao himself might not be a big deal, but Third Master Yin valued the sales channels in his hands. Today, Third Master Yin had specially set up a banquet at the Pure Gold Hotel to entertain this President Xiao. He didn't expect that something like this would happen in the middle of the banquet. Wasn't this just messing with Third Master Yin? Third Master Yin's cold face swept across Jean Wunsheng's group. Who hit him? Wild Dog immediately pointed at Tan Shuyuan. Third Master, it's this guy. Break his legs. Third Master Yin's voice was emotionless. It was as if he was crushing a mosquito. Two burly men immediately went forward and grabbed Tan Shuyuan. The other man already had a metal rod in his hand. Tan Shuyuan's face instantly turned pale. He shouted, "You can't do this. Is there still any law? I am from the Tan family. If you dare to touch me, my father won't let you off. Brother Jin, Brother Chung, save me." Third Master Yin's face was filled with amusement. Tan family? The Tan family that grows spiritual herbs in the southern suburbs of the city? The person in charge is called Tan Xinhua. The moment Third Master Yin spoke, the three men immediately stopped. They weren't in a hurry to make a move. However, no one noticed that Li Daochong, who was standing behind Tan Xun, was moving his eyes and his hand was emitting a trace of spiritual energy. Fortunately, the man holding the rod didn't make a move. Otherwise, he would have already fainted on the ground. When Tan Xun heard that Third Master Yin actually knew his father, he hurriedly said, "That's right. Tan Xinhua is my father." The long-haired youth sitting beside Third Master Yin sneered. "So you are that coward son. Your father doesn't even have the right to see Third Master Yin. Last time, he almost knelt down and begged for mercy in front of me." Tan Xun heard the long-haired youth's words and was instantly filled with despair. He could only look at Jin Wensheng and Cheng Jiahao. Among those present, only these two families had more power. At this moment, Jin Wensheng's intestines were green with regret. How could he have known that Tan Shuyuan would actually hit Third Master Yin's guest? This was too big a mess. But at this juncture, Huang Jiran was standing behind Jin Wensheng. If he were to cower, he wouldn't have the face to see her in the future. Tan Shuyuan had always been on good terms with them. "Sister Lan, I am Jin Wensheng. Jin Deju is my father. Brother Wild Dog also knows my father. I wonder if you can let my friend off for the sake of our Jin family. My friend will definitely compensate you handsomely." Jin Wensheng braced himself and spoke up. The extremely charming Sister Lan was now sitting obediently beside Third Master Yin. Ever since Jin Wensheng and his group came in, she had been smiling all the time. "Young Master Jin, Sister Lan can't help you with this. Do you know what your father calls Wild Dog when he sees him?" Sister Lan raised her phoenix eyes and asked while leaning on Third Master Yin's chest. "What does he call?" Jin Wensheng asked subconsciously. "Call him Grandpa Dog. Wild Dog is your father's grandpa. Third Master Yin is Wild Dog's grandpa. Your father has to call Third Master Yin ancestor. Do you think your Jin family's face is of any use?" "Ha ha ha." Sister Lan couldn't help but laugh. Her voice was like a silver bell. It was supposed to be very pleasant to the ears, but in the ears of Jin Wensheng and his group, it was ear-piercing. With a thump, Chunwei sat on the ground. He was so scared that he couldn't stand up. Tianming was in a daze. Su Rongrong's mind was blank. The two girls had never seen such a scene before. The Third Master Yin was a very influential figure in the Scarlet Sun City. Other than the four big clans, no one could go against him. Cheng Jiahao originally wanted to speak with Jin Wensheng, but after hearing Sister Lan's words, he completely gave up on the idea. He even regretted that he had followed them in. He had been ruined by Tan Shuyuan. Among the few people, only the Huang family's pretty faces didn't change much. They were still as cold as before. Of course, there was another person, Li Daochong. From the moment he came in, he used his telekinesis to scan everyone present. The one with the highest cultivation wasn't Third Master Yin, but the long-haired young man. He was at the peak of the qi refining stage. However, this wasn't his true strength because he was a body cultivator. He didn't cultivate qi at all. If a body cultivator's cultivation reached the peak of the qi refining stage, then his actual combat strength was at least at the middle stage of the qi gathering stage. Third Master Yin, this has nothing to do with me. I'm not very familiar with this guy. Can you let me go? Chunwei was so scared that his voice was trembling. If this matter isn't settled, no one can leave, Wild Dog said fiercely. Tan Xuyuan looked at Chunwei with a cold heart. This was the friend that he usually called brother. Third Master Yin, I, Tan Xuyuan, will take responsibility for what I did. I was the one who hit him. Can you let my friend go? I'll stay and let you do whatever you want with him. Tan Xun gritted his teeth and said, at most, he would break his leg and slowly recover. Chapter 182. Jin Wenqing's heart skipped a beat. Third Master Yi nodded and looked at Jin Wenqing's group. Did you hear what Director Chiu said? Kneel down and kowtow. The girl stays. The rest of you get lost. Hearing this, Chun Wei felt as if he had been pardoned. His legs were so weak that he couldn't stand up. He crawled towards the door. Tian Ming, Su Rongrong, and Cheng Jiahao all heaved a sigh of relief. Even Jin Wensheng, who had been stubbornly holding on, started to waver. Even if Huang Jiran was left behind, he couldn't save her. Jin Wensheng was considered a big shot in his circle friends. The Jin family had some power after all, but in front of the Third Master Yin, Jin Wensheng was just an ant that could be stepped on. The Third Master Yin had the Yin family behind him, one of the 4 big families of Scarlet Sun Planet. It wasn't something the Jin family could mess with. Although the girl was beautiful, she wasn't as important as his own life. You guys treat the Federation's cultivation method as child's play. My uncle is the deputy director of Scarlet Sun Planet Security Bureau. Trying to tame me, Huang Jiran said coldly. Just as Huang Jiran finished speaking, the Third Master Yin frowned. A smile appeared on his ferocious face. Little girl, since you said so, I'll show you what the law is. Keep all the girls and break all the men's legs. The moment Third Master Yin finished speaking, the long-haired young man stood up first. Beside him, Wild Dog licked his lips nervously. He had been waiting for Third Master Yin's words for a long time. When Third Master Yin said that he was going to let these brats go, Wild Dog was extremely disappointed. He had been too bored recently and finally found some fun to play with. It was a pity to let them go just like that. Chun Wei, who was about to reach the door, turned around and howled. Third Master, this has nothing to do with me. Cheng Jiahao saw 2 big men holding him down and couldn't hold it in anymore. He shouted, Third Master, let me go. I don't know that guy well. Jin Wencheng saw Wild Dog walking towards him and couldn't care less. He said directly, Third Master, let me go and I'll give you 10 million. When Jin Wencheng said this, everyone looked at him in shock. Only Huang Jiran didn't even look at him. It was as if she had expected Jin Wencheng to say something like this. The words of these 3 people had fully explained what kind of people they were. Tan Shiyuan was caught and couldn't move. At this moment, Xiao Quan was the only one with a bit of backbone. Not only did he not beg for mercy, but he also pushed and shoved a burly man who wanted to grab him. The burly man's strength was actually no match for Xiao Quan's. Tian Ming and Su Rongrong's faces turned pale, and they looked as helpless as chicks. Wild Dog walked in front of Jin Wensheng and grinned. With a coward like you in the Jin family, it will definitely decline in less than 10 years. Kneel down, and I won't do anything. Thud. Jin Wensheng really knelt down. Elder Dog, please spare my life. Jin Wensheng, whom they had relied on the most, had actually knelt down in front of everyone. The few of them felt their hearts turn cold. It was all over now. Even if it didn't die tonight, they would be crippled. Ha ha. Wild Dog laughed hysterically. He walked past Jin Wensheng and walked toward Huang Jiran. Then he said, Little girl, you're quite hot. President Xiu will definitely like you very much. Huang Jiran frowned. She knew that she was really in trouble today. However, she wasn't afraid. The Huang family was only stronger than the Jin family. There were many people in the family who worked in the Federation government. They were all respectable people. No matter how powerful this Third Master Yin was, he couldn't really go against the government officials. Huang Jiran didn't want to use her family to scare people. However, she could not talk about her background now. Just as Huang Jiran was about to open her mouth and say her uncle's name, a voice slowly sounded from beside her. At the same time, an arm was in front of her, blocking Wild Dog. Everyone present looked over in astonishment. They saw Li Daochong standing in front of Huang Jiran. There wasn't much emotion on his handsome face. He didn't show any fear in front of Wild Dog. There was even a faint smile on his face. One of his hands was in his trouser pocket while the other stretched out horizontally. You're the third masterine, right? I think we should just forget about today's matter. It won't do you any good. Just give me some face. I will remember this favor. Dao Chong, don't talk nonsense. Tan Xuan was so anxious that his face turned green. He was already prepared to have his legs broken. Who would have thought that Li Daochong would suddenly appear and say such words? If this wasn't adding fuel to the fire and angering the third masterine, he was afraid that he wouldn't just have his legs broken. Huang Jiaran stared blankly at Li Daochong's back. She didn't think that this young man she had just met today would have such great courage. He would stand up for her in the face of so many vicious big shots. Huang Jiaran's eyes moved. Her face couldn't help but turn slightly red. At this moment, her heart that had never throbbed before had a trace of ignorant emotion. Give you some face? Who the F***CK do you think you are? You want the third masterine to give you some face? Wild Dog, who was stopped, shot a cold light from his eyes. The third Master Yin's ferocious and terrifying face revealed a mocking smile. He looked at Li Daochong as if he was looking at an idiot. Sister Lan, who was leaning against the third masterine, let out a burst of laughter. Ha! Is this kid's brain damaged from fear? Li Daochong curled his lips and said lightly, It doesn't matter who I am. The important thing is that you guys better not provoke me. Li Daochong's words caused an uproar in the big box. Everyone looked at him as if they were looking at an idiot. F***CK, your grandfather. You F***king want to die. Don't drag us down with you. Cheng Jiahao cursed loudly. Jin Wensheng knelt on the ground with a look of despair. His body couldn't help but tremble. Although he was in the early stage of the Qi gathering realm, he was enveloped by a terrifying force field after entering the box. It was the long-haired young man's force field. Because of this, Jin Wensheng couldn't move. Jin Wensheng deeply felt the terror of the long-haired young man as soon as he entered. He couldn't even beat Wild Dog. Chunwei lay on the ground with a look of despair. He cursed in his heart. How could there be such a stupid kid? Why? Tianmeng and Su Rongrong hugged each other tightly with tears in their eyes. Tianmeng said to Su Rongrong with a sobbing tone, Why did you bring such an idiot here? He's dead. Huang Jiaran's pretty face showed a touch of worry. The situation had developed in an uncontrollable direction after Li Daochong's words. How could these bullies be scared by a few words that didn't make sense? They would only become angrier out of humiliation. She didn't know if she could still protect this kid. Haha, don't provoke you. There's no one in Xiang City that third master doesn't dare to provoke. Wild Dog laughed. Wild Dog, don't talk nonsense with this stupid kid. Do it. Beat him to death. The long-haired young man said coldly from behind. Yes, Brother Liao. Wild Dog responded and punched out. It was the same as when he punched Tan Shuyuan, but with more strength and speed. Be careful, Huang Jiaran shouted from behind. She couldn't bear to watch and closed her eyes. Tan Shuyuan turned his face away. Xiao Hoquan wanted to help Li Daochong, but he was blocked by two big men. Bang! There was a muffled sound. Gotcha! The sound of bones breaking. Wild Dog groaned and took a few steps back. He hit the big round table behind him. The arm that he used to punch was hanging on one side, unable to move. The shape of the arm seemed to have changed. The entire room was dead silent in an instant. Chapter 183. Wild Dog punched out. Li Daochong didn't use any strength. It was just a normal punch, but the power was beyond imagination. Wild Dog's fist and arm were completely destroyed. Li Daochong's punch was funny. He didn't know where this guy got the confidence to be so arrogant. Compared to Orson's fist, he was just a piece of paper. Huang Jiaran opened her eyes and was surprised to find Li Daochong standing in front of her as if nothing had happened. Wild Dog's blood was boiling in his chest. His entire arm was completely destroyed. There was no sound in the room for at least 5 seconds. Jin Wensheng and the others were shocked. Tan Shuyuan and Xiao Quan both wondered if they were hallucinating. Wild Dog, are you okay? The long-haired young man was the first to react. He looked at Li Daochong with surprise. Brother Liao, this guy is also a body cultivator. The pain made Wild Dog's face sweat in just a few seconds. He forced himself not to fall. Wild Dog found it difficult to speak. He looked at Li Daochong with shock and fear. Only he knew how heavy that punch was. No wonder you're so confident. You're a body cultivator. I like it. Liao Hui's white face showed a trace of ruthlessness. Third Master Yin's eyes moved slightly. His ferocious face showed a trace of coldness. Liao Hui, don't hold back. He dared to hurt my people in front of me. Kill him. Yes, Third Master. Liao Hui's face showed a cruel expression. He hadn't fought for a long time. Because there was no one around recently, Liao Hui had to do it. Daochong, you have the ability. Go and get help from a school. Tan Shiyuan said in a low voice. Li Daochong turned and grinned. I can deal with these guys. As soon as he finished speaking, Liao Hui suddenly moved. He appeared in front of Li Daochong in an instant and kicked Li Daochong's head. Pa! Li Daochong raised his hand casually. A crisp sound was heard. Liao Hui's leg went numb from the shock, and his expression immediately changed. Good skill. As he spoke, Liao Hui withdrew his whip leg, and a steel rod appeared in his hand, smashing it heavily towards Li Daochong. Be careful. Dodge! Huang Jiran exclaimed. Li Daochong did not move and reached out to grab the steel rod. Was this kid crazy? He actually dared to use his bare hands to catch Liao Hui's steel rod. Did he not want his hands anymore? Almost everyone looked at Li Daochong in surprise, and the same thought appeared in their minds at the same time. Pa! The steel rod hit Li Daochong's hand and made a crisp sound. However, the scene of the rod breaking bones did not appear. Li Daochong's expression did not change in the slightest. He grabbed the steel rod with his hand and forcefully snatched it from Liao Hui's hand. Then he kicked out. Bang! Even someone as strong as Liao Hui was sent flying across the table before crashing heavily into the wall behind him. Puff! Liao Hui spat out a mouthful of blood. What? Third Master Yin's ferocious face revealed a shocked expression. He was very clear about Liao Hui's strength. Liao Hui was the best fighter under his command. Liao Hui's strength among the body-refining practitioners was close to the peak of the martial arts realm. He even had a slight possibility of entering the martial arts realm. Liao Hui was once not a match for two practitioners of the initial stage of the Qi gathering stage. However, this young man could easily send Liao Hui flying. A bunch of good-for-nothings. What are you looking at? F***K. Let's attack together and chop him to death. Third Master Yin stood up and roared in anger. Suddenly, a cold light shone in the room. More than 10 big men took out their weapons at the same time and pulled out their shining, human-level low-grade machetes. Seeing this, Tian Meng and Su Rongrong were so scared that they hid in the corner. Jin Wensheng, who was kneeling on the ground, reacted quickly and immediately dodged. Chen Wei, who was sitting by the door, could not help but tremble. The two big men who were holding Tan Xuan put him down and joined the attack on Li Daochong. Huang Jiran was the only one in Jin Wensheng's group who did not show any fear. She did not know why, but standing behind Li Daochong, she felt very safe. Facing more than 10 machetes, Li Daochong slightly raised the corner of his mouth. How could they have the nerve to take out such children's toys? Hung Pong Ka Dong. In a flash, the battle was over. The people present did not know what had happened. More than 10 big men had all fallen to the ground and were howling. Some of them had arms that were deformed, some of their legs were bent, and some of their chests were slightly sunken. For a moment, the room was in chaos, and howling sounds could be heard everywhere. Li Daochong had actually been merciful. If he had used his full strength, there would have been no survivors. Jin Wensheng and his group all had different expressions, but the shock in their eyes was the same. Oh my God, what was going on? Just a moment ago, they had been mocked and ridiculed as a country bumpkin, but in the blink of an eye, he had become a hidden master. At this moment, Jin Wensheng's lower abdomen was a little hot, and he had the urge to pee. Thinking of his attitude towards Li Daochong, he felt that he had been F***ed up. This time, he had actually wanted to find trouble with him. Chung Jiahao and Chan Wei looked at Li Daochong in a daze, as if they had seen a ghost. Tan Shiyuan's mouth was wide open, but he did not realize it. His mind was blank. This guy was his desk mate? Was he dreaming? Whoever calls me again, I will break a few more bones. Li Daochong frowned and was annoyed by the howling. Once he said this, the room became silent. The group of big men did not dare to make any more noise. The entire room was silent. Sister Lan, who had been leaning on Third Master Yin's arms, subconsciously sat up straight. An invisible pressure made it difficult for her to breathe. I told you not to provoke me. Do you still think I was joking? Li Daochong walked to the round table and pulled out a chair to sit down. He looked at Third Master Yin and said indifferently. Third Master Yin's ferocious face twitched slightly. When had he ever been humiliated like this? He had seen all kinds of situations over the years. Even if his group of underlings were all defeated, he did not have a trace of fear in his heart. However, in the 20 to 30 years that he had roamed the Red Sun planet, the Third Master Yin had never seen such a powerful body practitioner. He was afraid that the strength of a self-cultivator was not much more than this. However, Third Master Yin was a ruthless character. He was a big shot that oversaw a region. How could he be scared? The shock in his heart quickly disappeared as he sneered. You are good at fighting, but this is the Red Sun planet, my territory. Not to mention that you are good at fighting. Even a true self-cultivator would have to lower his head in front of me. Do you know why? Why? Li Daochong asked indifferently. Because I, Third Master Yin, am the representative of the Yin family, one of the 4 big families of the Red Sun planet. No one can challenge me on the Red Sun planet. Otherwise, they would be going against the Yin family. The Yin family's patriarch is the #1 person on the Red Sun planet. He is a mid-stage Jin Dan Almighty. Brat, no matter how good you are at fighting, can you beat a mid-stage Jin Dan Almighty? If I want to kill you, I have at least 100 ways. Each of them will make you wish you were dead. Third Master Yin said sinisterly. Is that so? Li Daochong asked back with interest. Then his face turned cold. I only need one way to kill you. As he spoke, a talisman appeared in Li Daochong's hand. In an instant, the temperature in the room rose abruptly. Do you dare? I, Third Master Yin, have long disregarded my life. If you have the guts, then do it. If I frown, then I am not Third Master Yin. Third Master Yin said unyieldingly. Daochong, you can't, Tan Shiyuan called out. Li Daochong, don't. If you kill him, the Cultivation Security Bureau will not let you off. Huang Jiran anxiously tried to stop him. Did you hear what your companions said? I, Third Master Yin, am not only in the underworld. I'm also very popular in the legal world. There is nothing on the Red Sun planet that I, Third Master Yin, cannot do. No matter how good you are at fighting, can you defeat the entire Red Sun planet? Third Master Yin narrowed his eyes and continued. Brat, I'll give you 2 options. The first option is to kneel down and kowtow to me 3 times, call me boss, and become my hired thug from then on. I guarantee that you'll be satisfied with your monthly allowance. The second option is even simpler. Cripple your own arms and legs, throw down 30 million federal coins, and crawl out of this room. This matter will be over. Knock, knock, knock. Just as Third Master Yin was speaking, there was a knock on the door. Sister Lan frowned. Who is it? Sister Lan, it's me, the lobby manager, Xiao Zhao. Come in. Chapter 184. Manager Zhao didn't lower his voice when he reported, so everyone present heard the words young master and Ding Bang. Everyone knew who Ding Bang was in the upper class of Planet Crimson Sunday. When Third Master Yin heard this, fear appeared on his ferocious face. Thinking about Ding Bang's methods and his identity as a mental cultivator made him uneasy. A few years ago, Third Master Yin saw with his own eyes that more than 10 self-cultivators had angered Ding Bang. With just a thought, those self-cultivators all fell to the ground and wailed, as if they had fallen into hell. From then on, Third Master Yin couldn't feel at ease when facing Ding Bang. The terror of mental cultivators left an indelible shadow in his heart. Young Master is here. Third Master Yin stood up. Where is he? I'll go and welcome him. Manager Zhao replied, Third Master, young Master is already here. He told me not to make a fuss. I think I should report this to you and Sister Lawn. Third Master Yin nodded. Okay, got it. You did well. I'll go after I'm done here. Go and welcome him quickly. If you neglect young Master Yin, you'll lose your job as manager. Manager Zhao hurriedly said, Don't worry, Third Master. I'll go first. Okay, go. Third Master Yin waved his hand. Manager Zhao immediately left the room. As he left, he glanced at Liao Hui and the rest with a puzzled gaze. As for the only young man sitting there, he was even more puzzled. However, this wasn't something he could ask about. After Manager Zhao left, Third Master Yin's mind drifted. It was as if he wasn't here anymore. Nothing was more important than entertaining young Master Yin. That was the reason why Third Master Yin could be so arrogant on Planet Crimson Sunday Shaolon. You go and entertain young Master Yin too. Third Master Yin was worried that Manager Zhao alone wasn't enough, so he said to Rinlon, Okay. Rinlon stood up and was about to leave. But just as Rinlon stood up, Li Daocheng's voice suddenly rang out. It wasn't loud, but it pierced through one's heart and made one's brain buzz. Sit down. Without my permission, I'll break the legs of anyone who leaves this room. Rinlon was only at the 7th level of Qi refining. How could she withstand Li Daocheng's voice that contained mental power? She felt dizzy and sat back down. Brat, are you courting death? The fury that Third Master Yin had been suppressing finally exploded. Fine, then no one is to leave the room. Today, this Third Master wants to see what you can do to us. If you have the guts, then kill us all. If you can't, then you and your friends can wait for the wrath of the Third Master Yin. Li Daocheng frowned slightly. He didn't want to make a big deal out of this. He had only taken action to save Tan Qian, Xia Hoquan, and Huang Jiran. He didn't care about the lives of the others. Since Tan Shuyuan sincerely treated him as a friend, Li Daocheng naturally treated him as a friend as well. Li Daocheng couldn't just stand by and watch his friends die when they were in trouble. Li Daocheng didn't care about the Third Master Yin's group at all. If he was alone, he could leave or stay as he wished. As for the aftermath, Li Daocheng had nothing to fear. With his current strength, the motley crew couldn't do anything to him. As for the self-cultivator, Li Daocheng might not be a match for him now, but he was a student of the Federation's public university. With this identity, no one could touch him. But the Third Master Yin meant that he wouldn't let the others go either. Li Daocheng's gaze turned cold. The Third Master Yin's words made him want to kill him. Li Daocheng wasn't that stupid to kill the Third Master Yin in front of so many people. But he could still make the Third Master Yin lose control of his bowels without anyone noticing. He could do it with a telekinesis attack. No one would be able to find out the reason, even if they wanted to. However, Li Daocheng didn't really want to be ruthless, as the situation hadn't reached a point where it couldn't be resolved. Li Daocheng slowly stood up from his chair after the Third Master Yin's harsh words. He walked around the round table and stood in front of the Third Master Yin. Li Daocheng was much taller than the Third Master Yin. He looked down at the ladder and said calmly, I'll give you 3 seconds to think about it. Do you want to leave like this, or continue to challenge my patience? If you don't give me an answer after 3 seconds, I'll slap you until you decide. Crazy. This guy must be crazy. After Li Daocheng said those words, everyone in the room looked at him as if they were looking at an idiot. Although Li Daocheng's strength was strong enough, could he be as strong as the Yin family? Jin Wensheng and the others finally understood that Li Daocheng was a complete rash idiot. He was brave, but not astute. He only had some skills in his fists and kicks, but his brain was a pile of **T. Fighting with the Third Master Yin was like entering the latrine with a lantern and seeking death. Jin Wensheng was so anxious that he was about to cry. Li Daocheng, oh, Li Daocheng, your strength has already shocked the Third Master Yin's group. But can't you quit while you're ahead? The Third Master Yin gave you 2 choices. The first one is obviously to cherish talent. Isn't it good to be the Third Master Yin's underling? Li Daocheng had beaten the Third Master Yin's underlings to the ground, but Jin Wensheng and the others didn't feel relieved at all. Instead, they felt that the situation was developing in an irreversible direction. Today, they were doomed because of this idiot. Not only were they going to be unlucky, but they were also going to implicate their families. What kind of person was the third Master Een? He was one of the leaders of the underground forces of the Scarlet Sun planet. The consequences of angering him were very severe. There was once a clan that was even stronger than the Jin clan that went head-to-head with the third Master Een in terms of business and refused to give in. In the beginning, the third Master Een suffered quite a bit. However, after the third Master Een used his connections and forces, he crushed that clan like crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. From then on, the shadow of that clan disappeared from the Scarlet Sun planet. Jin Wensheng saw that Li Daochong had started to become arrogant because he was able to fight. If you don't want to live, don't drag us down with you. Not only did Jin Wensheng think so, but Cheng Jiahao, Chen Wei, Tian Ming, and Su Rongrong also thought so. The third Master Een was already scary enough. The family behind him was the pillar of planet Scarlet Sunday. It wasn't something that a few small families like them could afford to offend. The more arrogantly Daochong acted now, the fiercer the third Master Yin's revenge would be in the future. It was inevitable that he would take his anger out on them. You even dare to slap the third Master Een in front of so many people. Even if you want to die, you don't have to be in such a hurry. Chen Wei was timid by nature. He knew the third Master Yin's power too well. If Li Daochong wanted to die, then let him die. He couldn't be dragged down by this fool. After thinking about it, Chen Wei didn't care about his face anymore. He shouted, "Third Master, I don't know this kid. He was brought here by Tan Shuyuan. It has nothing to do with me. Third Master, if I lie, may the heavens strike me with lightning." Third Master, what Chen Wei said is the truth. This is the first time we met this kid. He transferred from planet Quicksand, Jin Wensheng said. The two talked back and forth. Huang Jiran frowned and looked at the two with disdain. Jin Wensheng also noticed Huang Jiran's disdainful look. But right now, he only wanted to save his own life. He couldn't care less. There were plenty of beauties. Without Huang Jiran, he could still look for others. He only had one life. Right now, the third Master Een was looking at Li Daochong's pitch-black eyes. He couldn't hear anything else. At such a close distance, even someone as ruthless as the third Master Een was a bit scared. If he was slapped in front of so many people, then he wouldn't be able to stay in the underground forces of planet Scarlet Sun anymore. The third Master Een didn't expect that this kid, who looked so young, would be so ruthless. He didn't leave any way out. It was really like a newborn calf that wasn't afraid of a tiger. Chapter 185. 1. Li Daochong started counting by himself. F***K, Liao Hui, who was lying on the ground, roared. Normally, he was the one who stepped on other people's heads. Why had he ever been humiliated like this? As the third Master's top fighter, seeing that the third Master was about to be slapped in front of everyone, Liao Hui rushed up and punched Li Daochong while enduring his internal injuries. Bang! Li Daochong didn't even look at Liao Hui. He waved his hand, and Liao Hui was sent flying again. The difference in strength was like a chasm. Liao Hui, who was a super fighter in Xiong City, had no power to fight back in front of Li Daochong. 2. Li Daochong's counting rhythm wasn't disrupted at all. Wait a minute. The third Master couldn't help but speak up when he saw that he was about to count to 3. Have you thought it through? Li Daochong raised his eyebrows. The third Master was a little scared now. He didn't want to provoke Li Daochong too much. If he angered this brat, no one in the room would be able to control him. If he was really slapped in the face, he might as well kill him. The third Master had no choice but to use a stalling tactic. Brat, you have guts. Why don't you consider being my subordinate? I can give you a guaranteed salary of 10 million every month. If there's anything else you need to do, it'll be calculated separately. If you want to tell me this, then it's time. Li Daochong was about to make a move. Suddenly, Chen Wei's roar came from behind. Li Daochong, if you dare to touch the third Master, I'll cut off Tan Shuyuan's spirit vein. Li Daochong, turn around. Chen Wei had climbed up from the ground and was holding a knife against Tan Shuyuan's abdomen. Tan Xuan was punched by Wild Dog earlier and was still dizzy. Just now, his body suddenly went numb. Chen Wei had taken out a Thunder attribute treasure and held him hostage. Li Daocheng's telekinesis had been covering the entire room. He would be able to sense any movement immediately. But how could he have expected Chen Wei to betray him? Chen Wei was a living example of a traitor. Ha ha, brat, you want to save your companion, but he doesn't appreciate it. Third Master Yin sneered. Pa! A loud slap resounded through the room. Li Daocheng looked in the direction where Chen Wei was holding Tan Xiuyuan hostage. He didn't even look at the Third Master Yin and slapped him. In an instant, the room fell into a deathly silence once again. Half of Third Master Yin's face immediately swelled up, as if he had been stung by a swarm of bees. The other half of his face, which was in good condition, turned green and then white. Sister Lan sat on the side with her mouth agape. She was dumbfounded. She knew the Third Master Yin's character too well. This brat actually hit the Third Master Yin in front of so many people. Sister Lan looked at Li Daocheng as if she was looking at a dead man. Brat, you must be tired of living. Third Master Yin is not someone you can touch, Sister Lan said in disbelief. Pa! As soon as Sister Lan finished speaking, there was another sound. Li Daocheng waved his hand and gave the Third Master Yin another slap. Chen Wei had two motives for holding Tan Xiuyuan hostage. One was to prove his allegiance to the Third Master Yin and cut ties with Li Daocheng. Two was to stop Li Daocheng from hitting the Third Master Yin and bring the situation under control. If he really hit the Third Master Yin, Chen Wei was sure that the Chen family would be buried with Li Daocheng. However, Li Daocheng didn't buy it at all. Chen Wei saw that he couldn't scare Li Daocheng. For a moment, he didn't know what to do. He was already scared out of his wits. He held Tan Xiuyuan hostage, but didn't dare to do anything. Young Master Jin, you're a smart person. Quickly go to the Supreme Hall and call young Master, and Sister Lan saw that Jin Wensheng was wavering and immediately called out. Jin Wensheng and Chen Wei were both shocked. They didn't expect the situation to develop to this point. Li Daocheng was pushing everyone into the fire pit. The Jin family couldn't be destroyed by this country bumpkin. Jin Wensheng was very clear about how powerful the Third Master Yin was. Huang Jiaran stared at Jin Wensheng. The latter's eyes flashed with hesitation. Sister Lan saw that Jin Wensheng didn't move and said, Young Master Jin, if you don't want the Jin family to be unable to survive on the Scarlet Sun planet in the future, go and call for help. Sister Lan promises that this has nothing to do with the Jin family. Jin Wensheng didn't hesitate and walked out of the private room. Daocheng, stop him. Xiahou Quan called out. Li Daocheng tilted his head and said with a faint smile, let him call for help. As he spoke, Jin Wensheng had already walked out of the private room and disappeared out the door. Sister Lan let out a sigh of relief. The Third Master Yin's swollen face also revealed a smile of relief. His eyes revealed a sinister look as he said, Kid, you'll suffer later. Daocheng, let's run. Tan Xiuyuan swallowed his saliva with difficulty. Huang Jiaran's eyes revealed a rare look of urgency. She agreed with Tan Xiuyuan's words and nodded subconsciously. She looked at Li Daocheng with a pleading look. If it was only the Third Master Yin, Huang Jiaran felt that her family could still be of use. However, it was a different story if it was the Yin family. On the Scarlet Sun planet, other than the other three big families, no one could go against the Yin family. Even the other three big families had to retreat in front of the Yin family because the number one person on the Scarlet Sun planet was in the Yin family. The Third Master Yin's true strength wasn't himself, but the fact that he had the Yin family as his backing. Everyone in the private room looked at Li Daocheng sympathetically. This hothead would soon pay a heavy price for his recklessness and arrogance. To put it bluntly, the Third Master Yin was the Yin family's lackey. One had to look at the master before beating the dog. Judging from Li Daocheng's skills just now, his cultivation base was probably at the Qi realm. His combat ability was at least at the Qi gathering level. With this level of strength, he could survive on the Scarlet Sun planet. A normal family wouldn't be able to do anything to him. However, Was the family an ordinary family? Not only was it not an ordinary family, but it was also a super family, or rather, the number one family on the Scarlet Sun planet. Third Master, are you all right? When young Masterin comes, he will definitely seek justice for you. I, Renlan, will kneel down and beg young Master and to avenge you. Renlan clenched her teeth as she looked at Li Daochong. Kid, I'll see how you die later, the Third Master Yin said sinisterly. Third Master, it really has nothing to do with me. Please be fair and let me go. Chunwei crawled in front of the Third Master Yin and cried. The Third Master Yin looked at Chunwei as if he was looking at a dead dog. Renlan smiled and said, You did well just now. Don't worry, the Third Master's eyes are bright. I'll wait and watch the show. There's no one on the Scarlet Sun planet that the Third Master can't deal with. Yes. Chunwei nodded as if he had been pardoned. He stood up and stood to the side, not forgetting to glare at Li Daochong. Dong. At this moment, there was a knock on the door. Come in. Sister Lan's face lit up. The door opened, and the first to enter were Jin Wensheng and Manager Zhao. The moment Jin Wensheng entered, he immediately said to the Third Master Yin, Third Master, young Masterin is here. When the Third Master Yin heard the knock, he had already stood up from his chair and hurried to the door. Sister Lan followed by his side. Jin Wensheng and Manager Zhao moved aside, and they saw a young man sitting in a floating wheelchair. His eyes were like torches, and behind him were a few men dressed in the same Taoist robes. They were all wearing sunglasses made by the Yun Yao Company. The aura of these men instantly enveloped the entire room. They were all cultivators at the peak of the late stage of the Qi-gathering realm, not far from the Foundation establishment realm. The young man sitting in the wheelchair was the young master of the family, and Ding Bang. When Sister Lan saw Ding Bang, she immediately burst into tears. She knelt down and hugged Ding Bang's two unconscious legs. Young Masterin, you have to help me and the Third Master. Someone destroyed our Scarlet Gold Hotel. Not only did they beat up the Third Master's men, they even slapped him. When Ding Bang heard that the Third Master Yin had been beaten up, he was instantly enraged. But when the door of the room was opened, and Ding Bang was stunned, he recognized that calm face at a glance and immediately cried out excitedly. Chapter 186. 10,000 ghosts devouring System Ding Bang ignored Renlan's pitiful performance and called out to Mr. Li the moment he entered. Who was Mr. Li? Did Third Master Yin have anyone with the surname Li? Renlan's face froze for a moment, and her performance came to a halt. Third Master Yin was also confused. He quickly searched through the list of people with the surname Mr. Li in his mind, but he couldn't think of anyone who young Master Yin usually addressed as Mr. Li. There was no such person at all. Masterin, Li Fugue hasn't settled the debt from before. Are you looking for him to settle it? Third Master Yin couldn't help but ask after looking through everyone with the surname Li. In the end, he only thought of the pawn shop owner, Li Fugue. At this moment, everyone's eyes were focused on Ding Bang. This young man in the wheelchair had a great background, so they couldn't help but pay attention to him. Thus, no one saw Li Daochong nod at Ding Bang with a faint smile on his face. Li Daochong could be said to be Ding Bang's savior. If it weren't for Li Daochong's help a few months ago, it was hard to say what would have happened to Ding Bang. Other than Ding Bang, his father, and Manian, was also saved by Li Daochong. The Yin family was also very curious about Li Daochong's background, and Manian had specially sent people to Blue Bay Star to investigate. However, the results of the investigation were unexpected. Li Daochong's life wasn't worth mentioning. He came from an illustrious background and had an impressive father, but he was the victim of a brainless family. After Manian read through the investigation report, he tore it to shreds. As the current head of the Yin family, how could Manian believe such superficial information? If Li Daochong's life was really so unbearable, how could he have learned ancient medical skills that were almost lost? How could he have cured a strange illness that even a Jin Dan alchemist couldn't treat? It could only be said that there must be some unknown secret behind Li Daochong. Either his father, Li Tianyang, had obtained some kind of secret technique, or Li Daochong had been taken in as a disciple by some powerful person, or he had a fortuitous encounter. There were only three possibilities. No matter which one it was, Li Daochong was definitely not what the investigation showed him to be. And Manian, and Dingbang, and Shinua had all interacted with Li Daochong before. Whether it was in terms of temperament or shrewdness, this young man didn't seem to be lacking in brains at all. As early as a few months ago, the Yin family had already placed Li Daochong in the ranks of the young talents that the family needed to rope in. With his ancient medical skills, he would definitely be able to use them in the future. When Dingbang saw Li Daochong, there was no one else in his eyes. He didn't even look at Renlan. The hover wheelchair moved and bounced Renlan away. He couldn't wait to float into the private room, and Dingbang's face was full of smiles. He walked past Renlan and headed towards the third Master Yin. When the third Master Yin saw that Dingbang valued him so much in front of so many people, he had long forgotten the pain on his face. He hurriedly went forward and bowed 90 degrees. He said respectfully, "Master," when Jin Wensheng and the others saw that Dingbang valued the third Master Yin so much, they were secretly delighted. At least they didn't choose the wrong side. If they had really followed Li Daochong and caused trouble, they would have died without a burial place. And Dingbang floated past the third Master Yin as if he didn't see him at all. The smile on his face grew wider. The hover wheelchair slowly turned into a spiritual exoskeleton. And Dingbang stood up and walked to Li Daochong. He enthusiastically reached out and held Li Daochong's hand tightly. "Mr. Li, long time no see. Why didn't you tell me and Shinua that you were coming to Planet Crimson Sun? We could have welcomed you." In an instant, time in the private room seemed to have frozen. Everyone's thoughts couldn't keep up with the change. They all looked at Dingbang taking the initiative to hold Li Daochong's hand with a dumbfounded expression as if they were old acquaintances. The third Master Yin felt dizzy. Sister Lan's face was very interesting. Her phoenix eyes were wide open. "What the F***CK is going on? Can anyone tell me?" The third Master Yin screamed in his heart. Chun Wei, who was standing in the corner, was so shocked that his eyeballs almost fell out of their sockets. This country bumpkin new masterin'? How is that possible? Jin Wenqing's legs went soft. He almost fell to the ground. This reversal was a little too intense. Was he King kidding him? "Brother-in, you're too kind. How are you feeling?" Li Daochong asked with a smile. "Yes, of course. After Mr. Li's treatment last time, not only did I get rid of the root of my illness, but my body also seems to be much stronger than before. My telekinesis has also reached a new level. Mr. Li's ancient medical skills are really magical," and Dingbang praised. "That's good." Li Daochong nodded. "All right. Mr. Li, why are you here?" After chatting with Li Daochong, and Dingbang remembered his purpose in coming to the private room, he suddenly felt that something was wrong and couldn't help but ask. "I came to eat with a friend and encountered a small conflict," Li Daochong replied indifferently. And Dingbang glanced at the private room, and then turned to look at the third Master Yin. When he turned back, his smiling face froze. Then, a cold light flashed in his eyes, and Dingbang could roughly guess what had happened. "Sanzi, you asked someone to call me. Someone said that someone slapped you. Who slapped you? What happened?" And Dingbang questioned. His tone was filled with murderous intent. It was completely different from the warmth and gentleness when he was talking to Li Daochong. The third Master Yin wanted to cry, but he couldn't. He wanted to beg for mercy, but he didn't know how to do so. How the F***CK did he think that this hothead would know masterin'? It seemed that their friendship wasn't ordinary. At this moment, Renlan was completely stunned. She stared blankly at Li Daochong. This young man's figure became unfathomable and unfathomable in her eyes. Tan Shuyuan and Xiahou Quan looked at each other. They felt like they were dreaming. What had they experienced in just 10 minutes? First, they inexplicably offended the third Master Yin of Qiyang City's underground forces. They were beaten, arrested, and put under house arrest. They thought that even if they didn't die, they would be crippled. In the future, they could only hide their heads in Qiyang City. Who would have thought that Li Daochong, who had been ridiculed and ostracized from beginning to end, would suddenly show his power and beat up the third Master Yin's men, displaying his unparalleled strength? They thought that things might take a turn for the better. At least, they had the capital to negotiate with the third Master Yin. At least, they could walk out of the pure gold hotel today. The two of them thought that they could talk about the future in the future. However, Li Daochong actually slapped the third Master Yin in front of everyone. Tan Xin, who had just calmed down, held back his anger again. When Manager Zhao came in and said that the young master of the Yin family was here, Tan Shiyuan felt that he was doomed. The Tan family was finished. He was already considering if he should move the family out of Qian planet. At this point, Tan Shiyuan felt that the world was spinning. Then, Ding Bang, who was called over, turned out to be an old acquaintance of Li Daochong. Master Yin, it's a misunderstanding. It's all a misunderstanding. No one slapped me. I slapped myself. The third Master Yin didn't dare to say anything else. He said with a long face, "Slap." Third Master Yin slapped himself hard on the face. Ding Bang frowned and grabbed the third Master Yin's wrist. "Ouch. Master Yin, be gentle. Be gentle. It's gonna break." The third Master Yin wailed. "I'm asking you a question. Who told you to slap yourself? Tell me everything. If you don't, I can only use my telekinesis to search your soul," Ding Bang said coldly. Chapter 187. 10,000 Ghosts Devouring System. Third Master Yin was sweating profusely. He looked at Li Daochong with fear in his eyes. He was no longer as fearless as before. He was almost scared out of his wits. No matter how blind a person was, they could tell that Ding Pang and this kid had a special relationship. It was definitely just an ordinary acquaintance. Yes. Mr. Li, what does Third Master have to do with you? If there's anything, just tell me. Even if you ask me to climb a mountain of swords or dive into a sea of fire, I won't even frown, Third Master Yin responded quickly. It's good that you're fine, but my friend is injured. Take a look. Li Daochong didn't want to kill him. Since Third Master Yin had admitted defeat, there was no need for him to pursue the matter any further. But before he could finish, Third Master Yin interrupted him. 1 million for medical expenses. All right, let's drop this matter, Li Daochong said straightforwardly. Third Master Yin nodded. He ran to Tan Shiyuan and transferred 1 million to him on the spot. Tan Shiyuan was stunned. He didn't know how he had received 1 million in his account. Huang Jiran stared at Li Daochong in a daze. The little girl's beating heart was slowly blooming. Ding Pang stood to the side and didn't say anything. After Third Master Yin paid the money, he returned to look at Ding Pang in fear. Don't look at me. Listen to Mr. Li. If he's satisfied, I won't pursue the matter, Ding Pang said with a solemn face. Third Master Yin had contributed a lot to the Yin family over the years. He was very good at controlling the gray areas. Although his cultivation wasn't strong, he was very smart when it came to business. He did things that the Yin family couldn't do. But compared to Li Daochong, Third Master Yin's usefulness paled in comparison. The Yin family hadn't been peaceful recently. Ding Pang and Imani Yin weren't the only ones with that strange illness. Others had it too, but they couldn't find the source. Even the Yin family's patriarch was helpless. Originally, Imani Yin had planned to personally go to Blue Bay Star to invite Li Daochong to the Yin family. Now that Li Daochong was already on the Scarlet Sun planet, it couldn't be any better. Therefore, if Third Master Yin really angered Li Daochong, no matter how optimistic Ding Anning State was about him, they would still cripple him in front of Li Daochong to give Li Daochong an explanation. And Ding Bang was very clear about Li Daochong's role. After the ancestor found out about Li Daochong's matter, he was also greatly shocked. The ancient medical technique had been lost for thousands of years, and its miraculous nature truly had the effect of bringing the dead back to life. Alchemists were people that every family wished to rope in, let alone an alchemist who knew ancient medical skills. Hearing Ding Bang's words, Third Master Yin immediately looked at Li Daochong with a bitter expression. I've already said that this matter is over. Li Daochong found it funny, but he didn't want to make things too difficult, so he repeated himself. Li Daocheng hadn't been at a disadvantage since the incident started. He had even injured more than 10 of Third Master Yin's subordinates, especially Wild Dog and Liao Hui, who were the best fighters. Right now, Wild Dog and Liao Hui were like Third Master Yin. They looked at Li Daocheng with eyes full of fear. A powerful person who was addressed as Mr. Li by the first young master of the Yin family wasn't someone a bunch of hooligans like them could afford to offend. They were only where they were today because of the Yin family. No matter how good they were at fighting, how could they beat a true cultivator? Mr. Li, if you're satisfied, I won't ask any more questions about this matter. Let's go. Let's go drink. Seeing that Li Daocheng didn't intend to pursue the matter, Ding Bang invited him. Li Daocheng nodded, but he wasn't in a hurry to leave. Instead, he said to Ding Bang, "Brethren, please wait a moment. I didn't know these people were your subordinates. They were a little heavy-handed. Let me treat them. Humph, these guys are blind. They deserve to be beaten up by Mr. Li. Let them be. How can they deserve to be treated by Mr. Li?" Ding Bang looked coldly at the group of people lying on the ground. He gnashed his teeth in hatred. Luckily, Li Daocheng was powerful. Otherwise, he would have been beaten up by these guys. If the Yin family wanted to invite Li Daocheng to treat them in the future, wouldn't it be a waste? Li Daocheng smiled and didn't say anything. He walked straight to Wild Dog. Wild Dog's face was covered with sweat. He had been standing up with great pain. His right arm was as uncomfortable as being burned by wildfire. Li Daocheng grabbed Wild Dog's wrist. "Ah!" Wild Dog groaned in pain and looked at Li Daocheng in horror. He didn't know what he was going to do. A stream of spiritual qi invaded Wild Dog's arm. The next second, the burning sensation on Wild Dog's arm disappeared. The broken arm bone, as if being soaked in spiritual liquid, was thirsty for nourishment. Wild Dog could clearly feel that his almost broken arm was recovering at an amazing speed. In just half a minute, Li Daocheng took back his hand. Wild Dog's senseless arm could move. Although it was not very flexible, it didn't hurt anymore. The broken bones were all repaired. "Mr. Li, it's me." Wild Dog's eyes moved. Facing Li Daocheng, he was afraid and grateful. As for hatred, he didn't dare to have it at all. Li Daocheng patted Wild Dog's shoulder and turned to Liao Hui. It was the same, but Liao Hui's injury was more serious than Wild Dog's. His internal organs were all broken. But Li Daocheng only spent 1 minute to heal his internal injury with rich spiritual qi. Using kindness and power, Li Daocheng thought that he would need them in the future, such as buying materials for making talismans. After curing Wild Dog and Liao Hui, what about the rest? Wan Lai Wan Xian Huan Song Nuoing Muyao, Huan Rong Wei, Liao Peng Tritium Catch Ju Huang Liao, Wan Tax. Curtain Li Daocheng showed such a skill. Ding Bang's eyes were shining. He could see that Li Daocheng's qi treatment had made a qualitative leap compared to when he was treated a few months ago. After Ding Bang pulled Li Daocheng away, there was a dead silence in the room for at least 10 seconds. Chen Wei sat paralyzed on the ground, his eyes lifeless. In the end, he had chosen the wrong team. Jin Wenqing no longer had a trace of arrogance on his face. He was like a drowning dog with his head drooping. Cheng Jiahao was slightly better, but his heart was also filled with fear. Even Tian Meng and Su Rongrong's faces were pale. Thinking back to this afternoon and during dinner, they mocked Li Daocheng. They even wanted to die. Who would have thought that a country bumpkin could be brothers with the young master of the Yin family, the #1 family on Red Sun Planet? Young master and even called him Mr. Li. What the F***CK? They felt like their faces had been slapped dozens of times. Not only did their faces hurt, but they were also scared to death. If Li Daocheng harbored a grudge in his heart and casually said a word to Ding Bang, the Yin clan would crush all of them like ants. Before Li Daocheng left, he told Tan Xuan, Xiahou Quan, and Huang Jiran to go back first. The three of them calmed down and prepared to leave. The more Chen Wei thought about it, the more he felt that something was wrong. The more he thought about it, the more scared he became. Tan Shuyuan had just left when Chen Wei rushed up and hugged Tan Shuyuan's leg. He cried, "Brother, save me. You have to help me this time. Help me talk to Li Daocheng." Chen Wei, am not a good person. I'm a snob. Just treat me like a dog in the future. Chapter 188. Ghost Devouring System. Xiahou Quan kicked Chenwei away. Jin Wenqing's face was ashen. He wanted to stop Tan Shuyuan, but he couldn't say it. Jin Wenqing was more experienced than Chenwei. He turned to Tian Ming, who had calmed down, and said softly, "Ming Ming, go and talk to him." Tian Ming heard Jin Wenqing call her that, and her heart trembled. Without thinking, she ran up and hugged Tan Shuyuan's arm. "Shuyuan, help everyone. Li Daochong treats you like a brother. It will be useful if you go and talk to him. No matter what happened today, we are all friends, right?" Tan Shuyuan was bitterly disappointed by Chun Wei and Jin Wenqing's actions. He acted as if he never knew such friends. But now that Tian Ming came to plead for him, Tan Shuyuan's heart softened. He was sincere to Tian Ming. Although Tian Ming had a lot of bad habits, everyone had their own preferences. Tan Shuyuan was infatuated with Tian Ming. Xiahou Quan kept winking at Tan Shuyuan. Unfortunately, Tan Shuyuan didn't care about Xiahou Quan at all. The soft feeling on his arm made him forget everything. Tian Ming saw that Tan Shuyuan was hesitating. She rubbed her body against him and whispered in his ear, "Chun, haven't you always wanted me to give you an answer? I'll give you an answer now. I agree to be your girlfriend." "Really?" Tan Shuyuan's eyes brightened. "Okay." Tian Ming blushed and nodded. Then she said softly, "But you have to help us talk to Li Daochong. Ask him not to take revenge on us in the future." "Okay." Tan Shuyuan agreed. It was useless for Xiahou Quan to be anxious. Tan Shuyuan couldn't see anyone except Tian Ming. Huang Zhiran heard that Tan Shuyuan agreed to talk to Li Daochong, and her heart skipped a beat. When Li Daochong left, she was disappointed. But when she heard that she could see Li Daochong again, her heart jumped with joy. Tan Shuyuan glanced at Third Master Yin and said, "Third Master, which room did my brother Li Daochong go to? I have something to say to him." At this moment, Third Master Yin no longer dared to act like a boss in front of Tan Shuyuan. Today's incident was caused by this brat. Since Li Daochong could stand up for him, it could be seen that the two of them had a good relationship. Third Master Yin hastily said, "Let me take you there." Ren Lan, who was at the side, volunteered, "Third Master, I'll take them there. You should quickly soak your face in the spirit liquid and rest." Third Master Yin touched his swollen face. Only then did he remember that he probably didn't look any better than a pig's head. He immediately said, "That's fine too." Ren Lan led Tan Shuyuan and the group of people out of the private room and walked towards the 6th floor of the Pure Gold Hotel. That was the highest level floor of the Pure Gold Hotel. If one did not have a net worth of 1 billion and his cultivation level was below the middle stage of the Qi gathering realm, want to go to the top floor, there was no way. At this moment, Li Daochong was already drinking and chatting merrily with Dingbang. In fact, he didn't even take the matter of being ridiculed today to heart. "Mr. Li, let me toast you. Thank you for curing my father's and my strange illness." And Dingbang raised his glass. In the huge, luxurious private room, a few bodyguards stood on both sides. Only Dingbang and Li Daochong were sitting at a round table. The rest of the people were all standing. "Brother, and don't worry. I also received the money." Li Daochong raised his glass and said, "Mr. Li's medical skills are superb. The consultation fee you received was not even 1% of other medicine refiners, but you were able to cure the strange illness that had been troubling my father and me for nearly 2 years. Just based on this, Mr. Li is a genius doctor of this generation. You're still so young, and your future is limitless. I and Dingbang admire people with ability and ability the most. Mr. Li, I'll drink first to show my respect." After speaking, and Dingbang finished his glass in one gulp. Li Daochong followed suit and drank the wine in his glass. Knock, knock. Just as the two of them finished drinking, there was a knock on the door. "Come in." And Dingbang was a little unhappy that he was disturbed. Sister Lan walked in carefully, looking a little embarrassed. "Master and Mr. Li's friends want to see Mr. Li." And Dingbang was about to reprimand Sister Lan, but when he heard this, he said, "Let them in." Tan Shiyuan walked in with a few people. Li Daochong looked surprised. "Shiyuan, you're looking for me?" Tan Shiyuan was about to explain the purpose of his visit when Chen Wei knelt in front of Li Daochong and said submissively, "Mr. Li, I'm sorry. I was wrong. I'm a jerk. No, I'm worse than a jerk. Just treat me like a fart and let me go." Jin Wensheng was a little embarrassed, but when he looked at Ding Bang, he couldn't care less. Although he didn't kneel down and kowtow like Chen Wei, he still begged for mercy. "Mr. Li, we were blind today. Please be magnanimous. I, Jin Wensheng, am here to apologize to you." Cheng Jiahao, Tian Ming, and Su Rongrong all apologized one by one. Li Daochong finally understood. He couldn't help but find it funny. He had already forgotten about the matter, but these guys were so scared that they didn't dare to leave. Li Daochong's expression didn't change. He said calmly, "Get up. I can forgive you for what happened today, but I have a condition. If you agree to it, I won't hold it against you." Jin Wenchang gritted his teeth. "Mr. Li, tell us. As long as we can do it, we will." In his opinion, Li Daochong just wanted money. Other than that, what other conditions could he have? Li Daochong looked at the wine glass in his hand. He took a sip and said, "Pretend that you didn't see what happened today. If any one of you dares to talk about what happened today, then don't blame me for being rude." When Qinwei heard this, he quickly said, Of course. Mr. Li, don't worry. If I, Qinwei, go out and talk nonsense, I will be punished by the heavens and devoured by thousands of ghosts." Jin Wensheng was stunned. He didn't expect Li Daochong's condition to be only this. He immediately agreed. Li Daochong didn't believe these guys' promises, but they didn't have the guts to talk nonsense. Li Daochong waved his hand. "Go." Jin Wensheng and the others left the private room first. Tan Shiyuan said gratefully, "Daochong, thank you for what happened today. From now on, if you need me, Tan Shiyuan, for anything, just let me know." Li Daochong stood up and patted Tan Shiyuan's shoulder. He glanced at Tian Ming, who was leaving with Jin Wensheng, and said, "Jin, you still don't have a good eye for people. Girls like Tian Ming should stay away from her. There are so many good girls in the world. Why do you have to be so stubborn?" Tan Shiyuan chuckled. "Daochong, some things can't be explained clearly. I understand what you mean. I will teach Tian Ming well." Li Daochong sighed in his heart. He didn't say anything more. "Then you have to keep your eyes open." Tan Shiyuan nodded. "Okay, Daochong, I won't disturb you and young masterin. I'll go back first." "Go." Huang Jiran stood behind Tan Shiyuan the whole time. Li Daochong didn't say anything to her. She left with Tan Shiyuan with a hint of bitterness in her eyes. 2 hours later, Li Daochong declined and Ding Bong's invitation to stay and return to Beiyang University alone. However, he promised Ding Bang that he would go to the Yin family to treat those with strange diseases in half a month. If it wasn't for the fact that it would take time to gather all the sick people, and Ding Bang would have brought Li Daochong back to the Yin family that night. From Ding Bong's words, Li Daochong had a deeper understanding of planet Qiyang. This place was more prosperous than Blue Bay Star. There was also an underground city on planet Qiyang, but it wasn't around Qiyang City. It was in Huampa Town, 500 kilometers away. A few days later, Li Daochong arrived at Huampa Town. Li Daochong thought about it for a long time, but in the end, he didn't go to Third Master Yin and Ding Bang. He felt that it would be safer for him to buy it himself. Regarding the Yin family, Li Daochong didn't trust them as much as he did old Devil Zhang. Chapter 189. There were still 3 months before the joint examination of 100 schools, and Li Daochong hadn't obtained any qualifications to take part. However, Li Daochong wasn't in a hurry at all. No matter how much old Qian urged him to take part in Beiyang University's examination, Li Daochong only agreed verbally and didn't sign up himself. Li Daochong had already made up his mind to take part in the direct examination, and there were still 2 months before the examination began. Li Daochong felt that his strength was sufficient to enter the front line. He planned to reach the later stage of the Qi gathering within 2 months, and then reach the peak of the Qi gathering stage through the direct examination. Then, he would directly enter the final examination of 100 schools as a peak of the Qi gathering stage. Li Daocheng didn't come alone. It was his first time going to an unfamiliar place, and having a guide would always save him a lot of trouble. Li Daocheng's first thought was naturally Tan Shiyuan, followed by Xiahou Quan. Unfortunately, both of them were taking part in Beiyang University's internal examination today. If they passed this time, both of them would enter the final examination, and if they passed, they would be able to get a place to take part in the joint examination of 100 schools. The importance of this was self-evident. Li Daocheng didn't participate, but when he found Tan Shiyuan, the kid didn't hesitate to skip the examination and accompany Li Daocheng to the underground city. How could Li Daocheng agree? He was just going to the underground city to buy some things, and it wasn't important at all. How could he ruin Tan Shiyuan and Xiahou Quan's future because of this? Li Daocheng wouldn't agree no matter what. Seeing Li Daocheng's firm attitude, Tan Shiyuan gave up on the idea of accompanying him and called Huang Jiran over. Huang Jiran was a music cultivator, not a combat cultivator. She didn't need to take part in the joint examination of 100 schools, and she usually didn't have many classes. The Huang family was in the business of spiritual machinery parts, and their supply channels were diverse. They had long-term cooperative relationships with some gangs in the underground city, so Huang Jiran was more familiar with the underground city. Tan Shiyuan felt that it would be better for Huang Jiran to lead the way. Huang Jiran received Tan Shiyuan's telepathic message and immediately drove his Star Brand flying shuttle to Beiyang University. Seeing Li Daocheng again, Huang Jiran's face flushed red. She drove the shuttle absent-mindedly. In the middle, they even took a wrong route, and after circling around, they finally arrived at the flying shuttle parking lot outside Huangpa Town. Huangpa Town was surrounded by mountains on all sides, and the entire town was shrouded in a layer of faint mist, giving it a feeling of a spiritual realm. However, the bustling crowd that came and went in the small town completely destroyed this artistic environment. Li Daocheng felt that it was like a market on earth, but the town was bigger than he had imagined. In the middle of the town, there was a tall cylindrical building with a height of 35 floors. In Scarlet Sun City, such a building wouldn't be considered a tall building. However, in this small town where there were only a few dozen buildings, it could be considered the #1 building. Mr. Li, I heard from Shiyuan that you're here to buy materials. What materials are you looking for? Standing outside the town, Huang Jiran asked curiously, with some respect in her voice. The strength that Li Daocheng had shown last time was already beyond Huang Jiran's knowledge. The strongest person in the Huang family was only in the late stage of Qi gathering. Even if he fought with Liao Hui, who was a pure body refining martial artist, he might not be able to gain any advantage. However, Li Daocheng was able to kill Liao Hui in seconds. This young man was not only strong, but was also a guest of the eldest son of the Yin family. How could Huang Jiran not respect him? Most of Huang Jiran's friends were hedonistic sons of rich parents like Jin Wensheng. They didn't have any abilities and relied on their family's power and wealth to go around eating, drinking, and having fun. They didn't think about improving themselves, and their cultivation was built with money. Their actual combat power was pitifully weak. Take Jin Wensheng, for example. He was obviously in the early stage of Qi gathering, and should be considered an expert among ordinary people. However, Jin Wensheng's actual combat power might not even be able to defeat someone in the 7th or 8th stage of Qi refining. His foundation was very unstable, and his spiritual meridians weren't developed very well. He was forced to use all kinds of spiritual liquids, spiritual medicines, and speed up his cultivation. He looked good, but was useless. If it weren't for this, Jin Wensheng wouldn't have been so scared that his legs went soft when he saw a wild dog. Therefore, when Li Daocheng appeared out of nowhere, Huang Jiran's heart palpitated. This was the first time in her life that such a person had appeared. Li Daocheng had already left and was about to go downstairs when he saw Tan Shiyuan being beaten up. Without thinking, he turned around to help. Facing the third Master Yin's group of fugitives, Li Daocheng defeated them all like crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. He was fearless. Unlike Chun Wei and Jin Wensheng, when they saw that the situation wasn't right, they turned around and sold out their friends, only caring about their own lives. Huang Jiran's heart, which had been silent all this time, was suddenly awakened. Women were emotional creatures, and that moment of feeling was enough for her to remember for the rest of her life. Miss Huang, just call me Dao Chong. Mr. Li sounds weird. Li Daochong looked in the direction of the town, and then said, I want to buy some high-level materials for making talismans. Huang Jiran stuck out her tongue, and a trace of shyness appeared on her pretty face. She said, Mr. Li, you should be a little older than me, right? How about I call you Big Brother Li? Li Daochong curled his lips and didn't look at Huang Jiran at all. At this time, his thoughts were all on Huang Patown. Whatever, as long as you don't call me Mr. Li. Huang Jiran got permission and smiled gracefully. Big Brother Li, what are the materials you want to buy? Li Daochong thought for a while, and then replied, Thunder Gold Powder, Red Flame Ink, Thundercloud Fog Water. The more Huang Jiran heard, the more shocked and surprised she was. None of the materials Li Daochong listed were common goods. They were all materials for making high-level talismans, at least level 6 and above. Every one of them was expensive, and if sold by the gram, it would cost more than $10,000. Especially the Thundercloud Fog Water, which cost 200,000 to 300,000 per gram. Huang Jiran was shocked and wanted to know what Li Daochong wanted these materials for. It seemed like he wanted to make talismans. Could it be that Big Brother Li was also a spirit sequencer? Huang Jiran's eyes twitched. If he only wanted high-level talismans, he didn't need to buy materials and could just spend money to buy talismans. There were only two kinds of people who bought talismans. One was a spirit sequencer who made talismans themselves, and the other was a buyer from a talisman company. Huang Jiran saw that Li Daochong wasn't interested in chatting with her, so she didn't dare to ask any further. She thought for a while and said, Big Brother Li, the materials you want are rare materials that can't be found in the small town's market. You have to go to the underground city and buy them at the Shadow Serene Square. I happen to be a mid-level member of the Shadow Serene Square, and I can enjoy a discount of 8%. Let's go, Big Brother Li. I'll bring you to the Shadow Serene Square. Actually, once they reached the Shadow Serene Square, Li Daochong didn't need Huang Jiran anymore. He wanted her to bring him in and let her go back, but seeing how enthusiastic she was and how she kept calling him Big Brother Li, Li Daochong didn't want to chase her away. Li Daochong was the Shadow Serene Square's Diamond VIP and the highest level member. He even had the priority to buy at auctions, and he could enjoy a 20% discount on all items. 10 minutes later, Huang Jiran brought Li Daochong to the Shadow Serene Square in the Scarlet Sun Star's underground city. This place was different from the Blue Bay Star, as it wasn't a tower, but a huge square building. It was much taller than the Blue Bay Star. Chapter 190. Huang Jiran turns around and sees several young people in gorgeous Taoist robes walking over. They're both men and women. The one who spoke is a tall young man who is the leader of the group. He releases his cultivation. Other than his friends, the other passers-by who come to Shadow Serene Square automatically disperse to keep a distance from these guys. The tall young man's cultivation has reached the middle stage of qi gathering. Unlike Jin Wensheng, his spiritual qi is rich and aggressive. Once it envelopes people, it will immediately suppress them and make it difficult for them to breathe. When Huang Jiran sees the tall young man, her face shows a trace of disgust, even more so than Jin Wensheng's. But under that disgust, Huang Jiran also feels a bit timid because the tall young man's identity is too shocking. Ouyang Ju, a direct descendant of the Ouyang family, the strongest of his generation, a student of the superclass of Qian University who is already qualified to participate in the joint examination of 100 schools and is at the peak of the middle stage of qi gathering. If Jin Wensheng is Huang Jiran's pursuer, then Ouyang Ju is trying to dominate her. Ouyang Ju's cultivation method is extremely strange. It is a secret method passed down from the ancestors of the Ouyang family. It can only be practiced by plucking yin to supplement yang. This method has a very strange name, chaotic clouds and rain. It is said that Ouyang Ju has to find a healthy woman to practice this method with every month. Almost every woman who dual cultivates with Ouyang Ju will have a weak body, weak spirit, and then seriously ill in bed. Some of them die of unknown causes, and some of them are not as good as before after surviving. Ouyang Ju's cultivation is increasing almost every month. In just 2 years, he has cultivated from the 3rd level of Qi gathering to the middle stage of Qi gathering. His cultivation speed may still be a bit slower than that of a real genius, but his foundation is very solid, and his actual fighting strength is much stronger than that of cultivators of the same level. Ouyang Ju is lustful by nature, and women are just playthings and cultivation furnaces for him. This matter was investigated by the Security Bureau of Qiyang City, but the Ouyang family is too powerful and they couldn't find any evidence. In the end, the Ouyang family just gave some compensation and let it go. Ouyang Ju's strange cultivation method was also taken out for analysis. If it is a demonic cultivation method, the Security Bureau can throw him into prison. However, according to the results of the research, this technique was not a demonic technique, but a kind of dual cultivation technique passed down from ancient times. It did not violate the Federation's rules of cultivation. Even though everyone knew about Ouyang Ju's deeds, as long as he waved his hand, there would still be a large number of women flying towards him like moths to a flame. There was no other way. Ouyang Ju had always been very generous. The Ouyang family valued Ouyang Ju very much, so they had a lot of cultivation resources and monthly allowance. Although Huang Jiran hated Ouyang Ju, he didn't dare to show in front of him. If it was someone like Jin Wensheng with Li Daochong by his side, Huang Jiran would have directly ignored him. Ouyang Ju was different. The Ouyang family was a super family that could directly challenge the Yin family. Even if Li Daochong had a close relationship with Childan, he was not a descendant of the Yin family. The Ouyang family might be slightly inferior to the Yin family, but Ouyang Ju was a genuine descendant of the Ouyang family. In Huang Jiran's opinion, Li Daochong couldn't afford to offend Ouyang Ju. Huang Jiran had to force a smile. I brought a friend here to buy something. Today, Huang Jiran had specially dressed up. His purpose was naturally to attract Li Daochong's attention, but it didn't seem to be working well. Huang Jiran was wearing a cloud jade corset robe. Half of the sleeves were exposed, and half of her arms were exposed. Her skin was fair and attractive, and her small waist was accentuated by the robe. Her lower body was wearing a knee-length long skirt. Her pair of full calves were exposed, and her bony ankles were extremely attractive. This outfit was youthful and beautiful, with a bit of sexiness, but it was not too revealing. Ouyang Ju, who had seen many wanton women, revealed a greedy look when he saw Huang Jiran. Even he, Ouyang Ju, rarely came into contact with such a woman. Huang Jiran had always been one of Ouyang Ju's targets, but many of the Huang family's clansmen worked in the Federation government, and the old master of the Huang family held a post in Kangwu Star. The Huang family might not be as powerful as the Ouyang family, but they were linked to the government, so Ouyang Ju didn't dare to use extreme methods on Huang Jiran. Oh, it just so happens that I also came to buy something. Long time no see. Why don't we go together? Ouyang Ju didn't even look at Li Daochong, who was next to Huang Jiran, as his eyes were fixed on the bulging chest of Huang Jiran. No, I still have something to do, Huang Jiran said as she pulled Li Daochong's arm and walked into the Shadow Serene Square. Ouyang Ju saw Huang Jiran taking the initiative to pull a man, and his eyes flashed with jealousy and hatred. Only then did he shift his gaze to Li Daochong, but he quickly lost interest. This kind of trash, who couldn't even afford a decent robe, was not even qualified to be his opponent. Li Daochong didn't look at Ouyang Ju's group from the beginning to the end and didn't care about the conversation between the two. Huang Jiran didn't say anything, and Li Daochong had already walked into the Shadow Serene Square. Seeing Huang Jiran leave just like that, Ouyang Ju was unwilling. He'd heard that Huang Juran was still a virgin and that she had an Yin spirit vein. If he could dual cultivate chaotic clouds and rain with Huang Juran, it would be twice the result with half the effort. Originally, Ouyang Ju wanted to find an excuse to invite Huang Juran to his birthday party, but he didn't expect to meet her in advance. Ouyang Ju naturally didn't want to miss this opportunity. Ran, what do you want to buy? I'll buy it for you. As long as you like it, I'll even pluck the stars from the sky for you. Ouyang Ju followed her and asked with a fawning expression, "Thank you for your kindness, but it's really not necessary." Huang Juran replied politely, "Huang Juran, who do you think you are? Young Master Ju's good intentions. How can you refuse like this? Are you doing this on purpose?" A tall girl following behind Ouyang Ju wanted to show off so that Ouyang Ju would accept her. That way, she would be able to get a large sum of compensation. That sum of money would be enough for her to live a carefree life for the rest of her life. When the time came, she would take this money and directly migrate to Kanwu planet. It would be much safer. Recently, planet Chiang wasn't very peaceful. It was said that many strange things had happened in many areas. The Cultivation Security Bureau had already launched an investigation, and even the local army had been mobilized. However, so far, they hadn't found anything. However, the people of planet Chiang had already spread the news that a spatial crack had appeared on planet Chiang that led to the Hades. Powerful dark ghosts had entered planet Chiang. The tall girl was called Yihong. She was one of Ouyang Ju's recent candidates for female cultivator. As soon as she finished speaking, the other girls and boys all agreed. One of the rich young masters said, "That's right. Why are you pretending to be pure? If you're really pure, would you come to a place like the underground city with a strange man?" TSK, disgusting. Huang Juran sighed in her heart, but she wasn't angry. Instead, she looked at Yihong and that rich young master with a sympathetic gaze. She didn't reply, but pulled Li Daochong and walked straight into Shadow Serene Lane. Because Huang Juran was an intermediate member, she could enter Shadow Serene Lane. She didn't need to wander around Shadow City. The moment she entered, a young girl immediately came up to greet her warmly. When the young girl saw Huang Juran and Li Daochong together, a strange look appeared in her eyes. The two of them really didn't match well when standing together. The young girl's clothes were exquisite. Her Taoist robes were expensive, while the young man beside her was dressed too shabbily. The difference between the two of them was too big. It was very eye-catching. When they entered, the scanner scanned the young girl and immediately showed her some basic information as an intermediate member. However, the young man didn't react at all. The young man obviously had nothing to do with Shadow Serene Lane. However, intermediate members had the right to bring a non-member into the first level of Shadow Serene Lane, so the young girl couldn't say anything. Chapter 191. Huang Juran glanced at Li Daochong. Seeing that he was not speaking, she asked, "Do you have thunder gold powder?" After Li Daochong entered, he had sensed a trace of indistinct death qi. This made him feel very strange, so he focused all his attention on sensing the death qi. Hearing this, the young woman was stunned. After a while, she said apologetically, "Miss Huang, I'm sorry. We do have thunder gold powder, but your level is not high enough. The first floor of the Serene House does not sell thunder gold powder." Huang Juran's pretty face revealed a trace of awkwardness. She asked again, "What about Qi Yinma?" The young woman continued apologetically, "Your level of authority is not high enough. You can only buy items on the first floor of the Serene House. Only advanced members can go up to the second floor, gold members can go up to the third floor, and platinum members can go up to the fourth floor. Diamond VIP members are the highest level members of the Serene House and can enter any place and buy any item. You are only an intermediate member and can only buy items on the first floor." The young woman very formally explained the rules of the Serene House so that the girl in front of her would not continue to ask. Li Daochong focused his mind and condensed a strand of telekinesis. Finally, he captured that indistinct death qi. It was in an area behind the first floor of the Serene House. There seemed to be many people gathered in that area. Because of the mixed auras, the accuracy of the telekinesis was greatly reduced. Li Daocheng had encountered many dark ghosts, but this death chi was extremely strange. It was sometimes strong and sometimes weak, sometimes bright and sometimes dark. It was erratic. Even its location was not very certain. It was sometimes in the east and sometimes in the west. Li Daocheng's eyes flashed. There was a dark ghost hiding in the underground city. It was a pure dark ghost without a body. How could a pure dark ghost hide in a crowd without being discovered? Li Daocheng frowned slightly. How was that possible? Li Daocheng had basically read all the books in the Black Sun University library. Now, he had a very deep understanding of dark ghosts. In his memories, there was no dark ghost that could brazenly hide in a crowd without being discovered. If dark ghosts wanted to silently infiltrate a crowd, the only way was to possess someone. This was the simplest, most reliable, and safest method. Other than that, there were only a few types of low-level dwarf ghosts that could hide in the form of ghosts because the death aura on them was extremely weak. However, the death chi that Li Daocheng sensed was somewhat special. It seemed to be wrapped by something, and was not the lifeless death chi. Huang Jiran really wanted to help Li Daocheng. She glanced at the name tag on the young woman's chest. It had the name Wen Yuan written on it. Knowing that she did not have enough authority, Huang Jiran asked again, "Miss Wen, is there any other way to purchase these items?" When Yuan hesitated for a moment before replying, "I do, but I don't think Miss Huang would be interested." Huang Jiran's eyes lit up. "What way?" When Yuan pointed to the back of the first floor of the hidden house. The hidden house holds a martial arts competition every month. In addition to the winners of the competition receiving large rewards, the audience can also place bets on who wins. As long as the bet is correct, in addition to the winnings, the audience will also receive an unlimited right to purchase. This is an event held by the Hidden House to celebrate the 30th anniversary of the establishment of the branch on Scarlet Sunday. The final explanation, rights belong to the Hidden House. Huang Jiran was somewhat tempted after hearing the introduction. She did not need to go up and fight. As long as she won a match, she would receive an unlimited right to purchase. It was worth it. Huang Jiran immediately turned and said, "Big Brother Li, why don't we go in and take a look?" Li Daocheng was nowhere to be seen. Huang Jiran had been so engrossed in Wen Yuan's introduction that she had not noticed Li Daocheng. When she looked back, he had already walked far away. Li Daocheng, who had sensed the aura of death, was completely focused on it. The longer he sensed it, the more uneasy Li Daocheng felt. This aura of death was not very strong, but it made Li Daocheng feel an inexplicable sense of fear. This was a feeling that Li Daocheng had never experienced in the past when he had hunted dark ghosts. Huang Jiran hurriedly followed Li Daocheng into a large door at the back of the first floor. After passing through a dim corridor, they arrived at another door. Behind the door, there was a clamor of voices. Some were cursing, some were jeering, and some were howling to vent. Huang Jiran frowned. She was very repulsed by this kind of situation, but in order to help Li Daocheng, she was willing to go all out. When they pushed open the door, an ear-piercing scream was heard. Huang Jiran subconsciously covered her ears. Behind the door was a large indoor area. It was filled with smoke, and in the center was a large circular stage. Around it were seats that spiraled upward in an arc, and at the very top were private rooms. This indoor area was very large, and there were at least 10,000 seats. But at this moment, there were no empty seats, and there were still many people standing. There were men and women, and all of them were filled with passion. As they watched the two warriors fighting on the stage, they waved their fists, wishing that they could go up and fight to their heart's content. Huang Jiran found the betting table, and a receptionist informed her that this match was already halfway through. She could not place any more bets, and could only place bets on the next match. Huang Jiran did not understand, so she was just about to place a random bet, but when she saw the minimum amount, she was given a fright. A minimum bet of 2 million, or else one would not be able to participate. Li Daochong did not come here to obtain the right to buy without limit. He was originally a Diamond VIP of the Shadow Serene Square. The reason why the scanner did not confirm his identity when he came in was because the Diamond VIP card that old Go Shang had given Li Daochong was placed in his Nayu bag, and he did not take it out. Li Daochong's target was that faintly discernible aura of death. Another ghost that could blend in with so many people without being discovered was either of a very low level or a frighteningly high level. But even though Li Daochong entered this area, he was still unable to pinpoint the exact location of the aura of death. Looking at the minimum bet of 2 million, Huang Jiran was dumbfounded. She only had a little over 1 million in her account. Just as Huang Jiran was fretting, Ouyang Ju's voice came from the side. Ran, are you also interested in black market boxing? Who do you want to bet on? I'll help you. Huang Jiran did not expect that Ouyang Ju and his group would also come to the arena. She turned her face and almost agreed. She really wanted to help Li Daochong with this matter, but in the end, she clenched her teeth and said, no need. Brother Ju, forget it if she doesn't appreciate it. Yihong rolled her eyes at Huang Jiran and then said sarcastically, Huang Jiran, you are the dignified daughter of the Huang family, following a country bumpkin. Did something happen to your brain? Chapter 192. When Huang Jiran heard these guys' words, her face turned red with anger. Li Daochong's attention was all on the death aura, so he didn't have time to bicker with these guys. He had a hunch that this death aura was very likely to be an extremely delicious spiritual energy meal. Ouyang Ju didn't place a bet. The bet of the black market fight was a drop in the ocean for him. One fight would at most earn tens of millions of Federation coins. This money was not enough for Ouyang Ju's cultivation. The purpose of his visit today was to compete for the ownership of the underground forces in the north of the Red Sun planet. The Red Sun planet was in the autumn of chaos. A few months ago, the boss of the northern region, Qiu Hai, suddenly died, causing the underground forces in the northern region to be leaderless. After a few months of chaos, the various forces decided to determine the final ownership through a martial arts competition. Whoever had the biggest fist would be the boss. This was the unchanging truth of the underground forces from ancient times to the present. All the forces coveted the northern region. Although the population in the north of the Red Sun planet was small, the environment was bad, and there were no big cultivation cities, but it was valuable because of its vast land, various cultivation mineral resources, and spiritual wood were everywhere. On the surface, the business and channels were firmly in the hands of the 4 big families, and no one could snatch it. However, the 4 big families disdained to do the dirty work of smuggling and selling in the dark. But the 4 big families didn't give up on the gray income business, but looked for local representatives. For example, Third Master Yin was the underground leader supported by the Yin family. The other 3 big families supported different people because of their different businesses. In this aspect, the Yin family did the best job. The Ouyang family had always been lukewarm, and they had never found a suitable candidate. Therefore, they had to arrange the family's young disciples to take turns in this business. This year, it was Ouyang Ju's turn. He carefully selected for half a year and finally found a body refining master. Today, he brought this master to compete for the fertile land in the northern region. If the Ouyang family could take the northern region, they would be able to share the limelight with the Yin family in terms of gray income. The master brought by Ouyang Ju was called Iron Eagle. At this time, he was standing behind Ouyang Ju with a pair of sharp eyes like an eagle looking for food in the sky. Ouyang Ju and Iron Eagle had exchanged pointers before, and he was unexpectedly not Iron Eagle's opponent. Iron Eagle's cultivation was 1 level lower than his, only at the early stage of the Qi gathering. After the fight, Ouyang Ju realized how terrifying the actual combat power of Body Refiner was in the early stage. No wonder all the soldiers in the army were body refiners. Only then would they have enough strength to deal with the nether ghosts and ghost beasts. The highlight of today's event was the competition between the various major forces with their own experts. Whoever won, all their opponents would become the leader of the northern region. Ouyang was very confident in Iron Eagle's strength. This guy's strength had already reached the peak of martial arts and entered the Master Realm. The difference in strength between him and a Foundation Establishment cultivator was very small. The first few matches were just to adjust the atmosphere. The main event had yet to begin. The Shadow Serene Workshop, as the #1 underground force, naturally became the organizer. The Shadow Secluded Workshop only did its own business and expanded its influence. It had always been a bystander to the disputes between the local powers. You could divide your cake, I'll just watch. As for my business, no one could take it away. The items sold in the Shadow Serene Square were never minerals or spiritual wood, but semi-finished products and finished products. To put it bluntly, the Shadow Serene Workshop was a processing plant and sales platform. Raw materials were not part of its business, so it would not compete for them. However, the Shadow Serene Workshop needed the stability of the local underground forces. This would be beneficial for their business. Otherwise, it would only be chaotic. Therefore, the Shadow Serene Workshop took the lead and used the name of the Black Market Fist to invite the various forces to compete. Whoever had the ability would take over the northern region. There was no need to make a big fuss here. The casualties were also limited. It was just a competition between a few top experts. There was no need for a group fight to minimize the losses of the various forces. In the future, there would not be any hatred because of this. In the arena, a loss was a loss. A win was a win. The winner was the king, and the loser was the bandit. If you agreed to a bet, you must accept your loss. Ouyang and the others had just stood there for a while when a young woman who had served Huang Jiran, Wen Yuan, also came over. As soon as she came over, she said enthusiastically to Ouyang, "Young Master Ju, your box has been arranged. Please come with me." Ouyang nodded. Looking at Wen Yuan's graceful figure, he could not help but feel a little restless. However, he quickly suppressed this restlessness. Even he, Ouyang, could not easily touch the people of the Shadow Serene Workshop. The owner of the Shadow Serene Workshop was Old Monster Yuanying. He could overturn the Ouyang family with a single finger. When Ouyang came in, he saw Wen Yuan receiving Huang Jiran. His mind moved slightly, and he asked a few questions in a low voice. When Yuan saw that Ouyang was a little interested in Huang Jiran, so she told him the process of receiving Huang Jiran and Li Daochong. When Ouyang heard this, he immediately understood that Huang Jiran came to the black market boxing arena to get an unlimited purchase right, so that she could buy the materials she wanted. Knowing the thoughts of the beauty, things were much easier. Ouyang immediately invited Huang Jiran. Ran, it's a mess down there. Why don't you come with me to the box to watch the battle?" Huang Jiran was just about to refuse when Ouyang continued. "Those who can enter the box are VIPs. The amount of the bet can be lowered appropriately. 1 million is enough." When Huang Jiran heard this, she glanced at Li Daochong and asked, "Brotherly, do you want to go to the box to watch?" Li Daochong, who had been unable to lock onto the death aura, glanced at the row of boxes above the seating area. He thought for a moment and said, "Okay." Li Daochong wanted to test it from above. Perhaps the accuracy would be higher this way. Yihong and the others were very displeased with Li Daochong's arrogant attitude when he wanted to enjoy it. He was obviously taking advantage of them, but he actually boasted shamelessly and put on an expression of reluctance. Was this good? What did he mean by okay? It was too okay. Under the lead of Wen Yuan, they went up to the second floor and entered the box. There were a total of 4 boxes around the ring. They were called boxes, but in fact they were open platforms located in the north, south, east, and west. There were only 2 seats on the platform. Ouyang sat down and said, Ran, sit next to me." Huang Jiran said, "Brotherly, sit down." When these words came out, Ouyang and the others were stunned. They had seen that Huang Jiran seemed to value this country bumpkin very much, but they didn't expect that she would take the initiative to let him sit. He was just a country bumpkin. Was he worthy? Huang Jiran was a famous cold beauty in the circle. She didn't like to talk or smile and was not close to anyone. Could it be that Huang Jiran had been taken down by this country bumpkin and cooked rice? Otherwise, how could someone as cold as Huang Jiran be so humble? I'm not sitting, Li Daochong replied ungratefully. From a moment he stepped into the box, he had spread out his telekinesis again to capture the faintly discernible death aura. He didn't want to be distracted at all. Ouyang Ju's face was livid. He invited the beauty to sit, but she actually took the initiative to let that country bumpkin sit. He tolerated this, but the country bumpkin said in a stiff tone that he wasn't sitting. Wasn't this F** king showing off? Ran, may I know which family this friend is from? Ouyang Ju was angry, but he couldn't vent it in front of Huang Jiran, so he asked, Brother Li is not a local. Huang Jiran knew that Li Daochong didn't want others to talk too much about him, so she simply replied and stood aside. In the end, she didn't sit down. Ouyang Ju was so angry that he gritted his teeth. He could only sit alone without a beauty to accompany him. Yi Hong and the other rich young ladies deliberately kept a distance from Li Daochong, not wanting to get close to him. Chapter 193. Fan Hao was one of the weaker powers in the north, but he had already occupied the north for 30 years. Fan Hao was the descendant of a tomb keeper of an ancient sect on Scarlet Sun Planet. In this era of cultivation, sects were no longer in line with the trend of the times. Because they were not flexible enough and were too authoritarian, they were eliminated. But no matter what, there would always be a few stubborn people left behind. Fan Hao's ghastly puppet sect was one such stubborn sect. 1,000 years ago, the ghastly puppet sect followed the trend and existed in name only. But this sect's vitality was much longer than expected. When so many super sects disappeared in the flood, the ghastly puppet sect actually lingered on for 1,000 years and still existed. Fan Hao was the 19th generation successor. But this successor was just a name and nothing else. All of the powerful techniques of the ghastly puppet sect had been lost, leaving only a remnant of the ghastly puppet technique. Fan Hao practiced for dozens of years and cultivated the ghastly puppet technique to the second level. Relying on this technique, he lived in the north of Scarlet Sun Planet. But half a year ago, Fan Hao's good days came to an end. The northern powers were in chaos, and the various powers were restless. The northern puppet sect that he had painstakingly built was almost destroyed. Fan Hao was enraged and forcefully used the third level of the ghastly puppet technique to summon a red ghost from a spatial crack on Scarlet Sun Planet. In the end, his most capable subordinate, Lei Hu, had his soul devoured by this dying red shadow fiend. That day, Fan Hao thought that he was going to die. Who would have thought that after devouring Lei Hu's soul, the red ghost's soul also disappeared and merged with Lei Hu's soul? It became an puppet body that was neither human nor ghost. It obeyed Fan Hao's every command, and there was no death aura on its body. Fan Hao accidentally succeeded in using the third level of the ghastly puppet technique and created an puppet body. With this trump card, Fan Hao was preparing to kill his way back to the north when he heard that all the major powers had gathered at the underground city's Shadow Serene Square's black market fighting arena to determine the ownership of the north. Fan Hao immediately brought Lei Hu and the remaining members of the Baiming clan to the Shadow Serene workshop. This time, he wanted to take back what he had lost in one fell swoop and casually humiliate those big shots who had once abused him. Lei Hu, who possessed the corpse body, was unimaginably powerful. The Red Shadow Malicious Ghost was one of the stronger malicious ghosts among the dark ghosts. Even though he was severely injured for some reason, he was still ridiculously powerful after possessing the Lightning Tiger. Fan Hao brought Lei Hu to the southern wasteland of the Scarlet Sun Planet. There were many body practitioners and self-cultivators who ventured deep into the wasteland in search of spear herbs. Most of them were desperados. Within a month, Lei Hu had killed more than 10 people, the strongest of which were a Qi-gathering early-stage body practitioner and a Foundation Establishment stage Qi practitioner. All of them were settled within 10 moves. After witnessing the Thunder Tiger's strength, Fan Hao was overjoyed. With the malevolent Thunder Tiger, he could wipe out all the underground forces of the Scarlet Sun planet. As long as those great clans and the four great clans didn't interfere, Fan Hao was invincible. The strongest person in the underground forces of the Scarlet Sun planet was only at the early stage of the Foundation establishment stage, and Lei Hu's actual combat ability could easily surpass that. With Lei Hu, Fan Hao would even dare to fight against the great clans. In the past few months, the one who had made Fan Hao suffer the most was the third master of the Scarlet Sun planet. It could be said that half of the members of the Northern Puppet Gang were killed by the third master of the Scarlet Sun planet. At this moment, the third master of the Scarlet Sun planet was sitting in the largest open private room across from Fan Hao. Fan Hao wouldn't mistake the man and woman standing behind the third master of the Scarlet Sun planet. One was Liao Hui, and the other was A Jiao. These two were the third master of the Scarlet Sun planet's fighters, and they had made great contributions to the third master of the Scarlet Sun planet. Both of them were body practitioners. Liao Hui was at the peak of the qi refining stage. Although A Jiao was a woman, her strength was above Liao Hui, and she was at the early stage of the qi gathering. A body refining cultivator at the early stage of qi gathering would have an extremely terrifying battle prowess. In close combat, even a Foundation establishment cultivator would have to be careful. Being injured by a punch would definitely not feel good. Fan Hao glanced at the confident Third Master Een and sneered. Third Master Een, I'll make an example out of you today. I'll make an example out of you and let everyone in the underground forces know that I, Fan Hao, am not someone to be trifled with. Boss Fan, there are 2 more matches left. Today's black market boxing will be over, and the official martial arts competition will begin next. Should we shock the audience right from the start, or should we let the others have a good time first? A skinny middle-aged man beside Fan Hao asked with anticipation. There's no need to rush. Let them fight for a while first. If we attack right from the start, won't we become the target of public criticism? You have to remember, don't provoke public anger at any time. Otherwise, no matter how strong you are, you will drown to death, Fan Hao said sinisterly. While Fan Hao was talking to his subordinates, he did not notice at all that there was a pair of dark eyes that were like stars looking at him indifferently from the open box platform beside him. The owner of this pair of eyes was Li Daocheng. He had already found the source of the death qi, and it was among these dozen people. Li Daocheng's psyche power swept through these dozen people one by one and finally wandered between 2 people. He was unable to determine who the death qi was coming from. One was Fan Hao, and the other was Lei Hu, whose face was filled with hostility. Brother Ju, I also want to bet for fun. You are a genius student of Qiyang University's superclass. You are an expert. You can easily see through these 3-legged cats' martial arts at a glance. Can you give me some advice? Yihong looked at Ouyang Ju for a while and felt bored. Ouyang Ju was worried that he didn't have a chance to show his ability in front of Huang Jiran. So when Yihong asked, he immediately spoke with assurance. The people who fight in the black market boxing are all practitioners from the slums. Most of them practice body refining instead of qi refining and pursue quick success. The 2 people in the stands, the one in red seems to be retreating, but he doesn't seem to be losing. His steps are not messy at all, and he is very methodical. On the other hand, the one in white who is attacking is too eager for quick success and instant benefits. He only wants to slap his opponent to death. This kind of fight consumes a lot of physical strength. The consequence of not practicing qi refining is that his endurance is extremely poor. If he only relies on brute force, he will definitely lose in less than 10 moves. You still have time to bet. After listening to Ouyang Ju's explanation, Yihong immediately used the betting machine next to the box to bet that the one in red would win. Ran, you can also bet. If you win, it's on you. If you lose, it's on me. Ouyang Ju said confidently to Huang Jiran. The rich young master at the side knew that Ouyang Ju didn't like the country bumpkin that Huang Jiran brought. So he said, Hey kid, Brother Ju's analysis is so accurate. You should also bet. It's not often that you have the opportunity to earn money for free, right? Look at your weak qi. I'm afraid you won't be able to understand these 3-legged cats' martial arts. Haha. The rich young master's words caused the others to burst into laughter. Gao Yifeng, no one will think you're mute if you don't speak. Huang Jiaran said angrily. Ran, he's just a country bumpkin. Why are you so protective of him? Compared to Brother Ju, how is he better than Brother Ju? Who doesn't know Brother Ju on Qiang planet? Who knows this guy? The rich young master, Gao Yifeng, looked at Li Daochong with disdain. As soon as he finished speaking, there was a knock on the door. Gao Yifeng, who had finished speaking, turned to open the door. When he opened the door, he immediately sucked in a breath of cold air. Outside the door was the third Master Yin and his group of people. They were definitely big shots in the underground forces of Qiang planet. Gao Yifeng had only seen them a few times from afar. Third Master Yin, Gao Yifeng called out subconsciously. He then reached out his hand, but the third Master Yin didn't seem to see him and pushed him away. When Ouyang Ju and the others heard Gao Yifeng call out the 3 words, Third Master Yin, they all turned around in confusion. When they saw that it was really the third Master Yin, they were all shocked. The third Master Yin's name was too famous. They couldn't help but tremble in fear. Even Ouyang Ju stood up from his seat and wanted to greet him. However, the third Master Yin walked behind Li Daochong nervously and greeted him carefully. Mr. Li, why didn't you inform me that you were coming here? I could have arranged a private room for you. It's really a sin to let you stand. Chapter 194. Li Daochong had already sensed the presence of the third Master Yin when he entered the arena. However, he didn't have the intention to greet them as he focused on finding the death aura. Li Daochong didn't expect the third Master Yin to personally bring everyone to find him. Now, he was sure that the death aura was on one of the 2 guys. Li Daochong didn't turn around. He was still looking at Fan Hao and Lei Hu, thinking about how to devour the strange death aura. I'm here by something. Looking at the situation, it seems that there's something big going on in the arena today. Li Daochong replied casually. Mr. Li, you have great foresight. There is indeed something big going on today. Mr. Li, why don't you come to my room and I'll explain it to you in detail. The third Master Yin didn't even look at Ouyang Ju and the others. When Ouyang Ju and the others heard the conversation between the third Master Yin and Li Daochong, they were all shocked. Who is this country bumpkin? How could he make the third Master Yin treat him so humbly? Gao Yifeng, who was standing at the side, didn't feel good. Half a minute ago, he said that this country bumpkin didn't know anyone. Half a minute later, the leader of the Red Sun planet's underground forces, the third Master Yin, personally came to invite him. Gao Yifeng's face was burning. He looked at Li Daochong with fear. The unknown was always scarier than the known. Gao Yifeng was afraid of Ouyang Ju because the Ouyang family was powerful and Ouyang Ju's cultivation was high. However, these were all known facts. Gao Yifeng didn't even know the name of this country bumpkin. Originally, Gao Yifeng thought that this kind of person was even worse than a passerby. He didn't know what kind of luck he had to get to know Huang Jiaran, or maybe he helped Huang Jiaran in some insignificant matter. That was why this seemingly cold, but actually pure beauty fell in love with him. Who would have thought that the third Master Yin would be so humble to this country bumpkin? No matter how stupid Gao Yifeng was, he could tell that this country bumpkin had an extraordinary background. As for why the third Master Yin was afraid of him, what kind of background did he have? What was his name? Gao Yifeng didn't know anything. The fear of the unknown spread in Gao Yifeng's heart. Huang Jiaran said that he was an outsider. Could he be from the Kangwu star? Every level up of a cultivation planet was enough to crush someone to death. The Kangwu planet was a second-grade cultivation planet. No matter how powerful the Crimson Sun planet was, it was only a fourth-grade cultivation planet. But if he was from Kangwu, then Ouyang Ju would have to look up to him. On Kangwu planet, even a small village official had more authority than the patriarch of a large clan. Li Daochong didn't want to be with Ouyang Ju and the others. The reason why he could enter this box was to find a good place to sense the death aura. Now that he had basically confirmed it, there was no need to stay here anymore. All right, let's go. Li Daochong agreed. Hearing Li Daocheng's approval, the third Master Yin was overjoyed. Mr. Li was young Master N's guest. He had heard about how young Master N and Mr. Li knew each other. Mr. Li had saved young Master N's life and was young Master N's benefactor. After hearing this news, Mr. Li's position in the third Master Yin's heart rose again. How could he offend young Master N's benefactor? Mr. Li, come with me. The third Master Yin hurriedly made a pleased gesture. Li Daocheng walked out of the room. Huang Jiran, who had been ignored, ran out and looked at Li Daocheng with resentment. Brother Li, can you bring me along? Li Daocheng looked at the resentment on Huang Jiran's delicate face. It reminded him of Yin Ping. That girl was very concerned about him today, but she didn't have the ability. Just now, when Ouyang Ju tried to assassinate the cameraman, she defended him. How could Li Daocheng not know about Huang Jiran's enthusiasm? When the third Master Yin invited him, it wasn't that he didn't think of Huang Jiran. He just thought that since she knew Ouyang Ju and his group, she might be more natural here. The third Master Yin's group were all fierce people who lived on the edge of a knife. Li Daocheng was afraid that Huang Jiran wouldn't be used to it, so he didn't take the initiative to call her. But since Huang Jiran took the initiative to ask, Li Daocheng naturally wouldn't leave her alone. He smiled and said, "Of course, I have to bring you along. You're my guide. Without you, I would be a headless fly." Huang Jiran didn't expect that Li Daocheng, who had been ignoring her all the way, would say that. Her face suddenly turned red. She lowered her head and didn't dare to look at Li Daocheng. She answered obediently, "Why are you still standing there? Let's go. Do you want me to carry you?" Li Daocheng patted Huang Jiran's little head gently and took her little hand to walk out of the room. Seeing this scene, Ouyang Ju's lungs were about to explode. Since he started to pick up girls, no one had dared to say such explicit words to the girl he liked in front of him. "Carry? King dare to carry me? I don't care who you are, I will kill you." The fire in Ouyang Ju's heart kept burning. Huang Jiran was the target he was most satisfied with. Now, she was taken away by a young boy with a few words in one hand. How could he not be angry? How could he not be angry? Huang Jiran was suddenly pulled away by Li Daocheng. Her heart was in a mess and her mind went blank. She was pulled away just like that. Once they entered the room, Third Master Yin invited Li Daocheng to the seat of honor. Li Daocheng naturally didn't stand on ceremony with him. Huang Jiran sat beside Li Daocheng. Third Master Yin then started to tell Li Daocheng the ins and outs of today's events. After listening, Li Daocheng also wanted to see how powerful the underground forces of planet Qiyang were. The 2 rounds of underground fighting ended quickly. At this moment, there was a commotion in the seats below. A petite woman wearing a cheongsam walked in from the main door. Behind her, there were more than 10 men and women in different clothes. Their auras weren't weak. Among them, a tall and sturdy middle-aged man followed closely behind the cheongsam woman. His eyes were like torches and his aura was aggressive. Third Master Yin quickly introduced, "Mr. Li, this woman has a strong background. She is the leader of the eastern region of planet Qiyang. She is the spokesperson of the Yi family, one of the 4 big families of planet Qiyang. Her name is Ruan Jinfeng. The man behind her is her bodyguard and fighter, Zhu Xiaotian. People call him Violent Lion. His martial arts skills are quite good. He once killed a late-stage Qi gathering cultivator in a second. He is an expert of the underground forces." Li Daocheng listened to Third Master Yin's explanation while looking at the group of people walking in. Suddenly, Li Daocheng's gaze froze and a strange expression appeared on his face. How could it be her? Among the group of people behind Ruan Jinfeng, there was a tall woman wearing a black martial arts uniform. She was Li Daocheng's first love, a collateral descendant of the Li family, Li Xiumei. Didn't she leave Blue Bay Star with Yiren Fei and go to planet Qiyang? Because Li Xiumei had left a deep impression in the memories of his predecessor. When Li Daocheng saw her, he was affected by the memories and couldn't help but feel a ripple in his heart. This was an emotion that he couldn't control. Li Daocheng naturally didn't have any feelings for Li Xiumei. But after all, they had a beautiful time together. Now that he saw her, it was inevitable that some scenes of the past would appear. Why did Li Xiumei come to planet Qiyang? Just as Li Daocheng was feeling strange, he noticed that Li Xiumei was holding the hand of an old man beside her. Using his telekinesis, Li Daocheng's lips curled up. Disguise. That old man was the result of Yi Renfei's disguise. With Ruan Jinfeng's arrival, the leaders of the underground forces who were fighting for the ownership of the northern region had all arrived. Ouyang Ju, Third Master Yin, Ruan Jinfeng, and a white-haired old man were all sitting in another box. The white-haired old man was called White Ape. Although he had a few powerful people under him, he was the most powerful person in the White Ape gang. Moreover, he wasn't a body cultivator, but a cultivator. He was at the peak of the Qi gathering stage and was one step away from the foundation establishment stage. Although he was old, his foundation was very solid. It was said that even an early foundation establishment stage self-cultivator might not be able to do anything to him. The leaders of all parties gathered together. This kind of grand occasion wasn't usually seen. The tens of thousands of gamblers and spectators in the black market boxing arena suddenly quieted down. At the same time, a threatening aura exploded from several positions. Chapter 195. The fight for ownership was the highlight of today's black market boxing arena. The news had already spread in the underground circle. Although the black market boxing arena was usually very popular, it was rare to see a full house like today. Li Daocheng sat in the head seat of the box on the south side. He looked excited. He did not expect to meet all the big shots of the underground forces on his first visit to Planet Crimson Sun's underground city. Li Daocheng did not care about these big shots. He was more interested in the fight. When he was in Blue Bay Star, Li Daocheng's opponents were from the academic faction. He had not fought anyone from the Jianghu faction yet. No matter how strong the academic faction was, they were relatively gentle. They were strong, but not ruthless. The Jianghu faction was different. They were all ruthless people who lived on the edge of a knife. In order to survive and fight for territory, they often had fierce conflicts. They would fight if they did not agree with each other. They had much more combat experience than the academic faction. Naturally, they were stronger. When Ruan Jinfeng and the others entered the box and sat down, a woman with a hot figure from the Shadow Serene Square walked up to the ring. She held a spirit weed in her hand and said a few words. She explained the rules and then announced, "There's only one purpose for the Shadow Serene Square to hold this fight today. It is to prevent any disputes in private and to prevent large-scale casualties. It is also to give a chance to those friends in the north who are weak but want to take charge. For today's fight, no matter who you are, as long as you have the confidence, you can come up to the ring and fight. However, I would like to remind everyone that there are no restrictions other than the fact that you're not allowed to use poison or fight with more people. As long as you come up to the ring, it means that you have accepted all the rules of the black market boxing arena." The woman paused and said, "Whoever wants to fight can come up to the ring now." As soon as she finished speaking, many of the powerful outlaws below the ring were ready to fight. Many of them thought that they had some skills and wanted to use this fight to rise to the top. There were indeed many strong individuals in the underground forces. However, there were lone wolves who did not have any gangs or their own forces. They were definitely good in one-on-one fights. However, they did not have any helpers. If they met a big force, they would be a bunch of small fries, tearing you and twisting furrows. Huh. The audience was silent for a few seconds. Then a burly man in the audience roared, "I'll do it." The burly man jumped several meters high. His huge body was not clumsy at all. He steadily landed on the stage and cupped his fists. "I am Bronze Arm Zhang Chuan. I would like to seek your guidance." Zhang Chuan's voice was as loud as a bell. Every corner of the arena could clearly hear every word he said. When Li Daocheng heard this self-introduction from the Jianghu, the blood in his body resonated with it, and his eyes became more and more excited. In his previous life, Li Daocheng had also fantasized about becoming a chivalrous figure. One man, one sword, hidden in the Jianghu. How heroic, how carefree, and how happy a life would be. "Zhang Chuan, you brat," injured my brother last year. Today is the perfect time to settle the score. Let me enlighten you." The crowd below the stage roared. Another burly man jumped onto the stage. This man was even bigger than Zhang Chuan. At first glance, one could tell that he was an outstanding representative of the brute force style. "Xiongqua, so it's you. Oomph. Even your brother is no match for me. You're not even as good as your brother. Are you here to die?" Bronze-armed Zhang Chuan said coldly. "Zhang Chuan, don't you know the saying, a scholar who has been away for 3 days must be looked at with new eyes? Don't waste my time. If you have the ability, then get me out of the stage." Xiongqua said in a rough voice. Zhang Chuan's face darkened. A cruel smile appeared on his face. With a low roar, he threw a punch without any warning. Xiongqua's eyes flashed. He raised his hand to block. Bang! A muffled sound. With the fist and forearm at the center, a shockwave burst out, shaking the area. From the sound of this punch, one could tell that if it hit a wall, it would probably blast a big hole in the wall. "You dare to be arrogant with this punching power? Who gave you the courage?" Xiongqua said indifferently. Zhang Chuan was surprised. He did not expect Xiongqua's defense to have improved so much compared to a year ago. Xiongqua grabbed Zhang Chuan's wrist and threw a punch at the latter's face. Bang! 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 In the blink of an eye, the two men had exchanged more than 10 punches, neither giving way to the other. The atmosphere under the stage was also stirred up. The fight between the two men was much more intense than the fight between the contestants in the black market. Boom! With a loud sound, Xiongqua was punched in the face by Zhang Chuan. His body landed heavily on the stage. Zhang Chuan raised his leg and kicked again. Xiongqua did not have time to defend himself. His lower abdomen was hit hard, and he spat out a mouthful of acid. He slid for more than 10 meters on the stage and fell outside. Xiongqua blacked out and fainted. Zhang Chuan had won. His eyes were filled with pride. Today, he would let everyone know that he, Bronze Arm, was not someone to be messed with. "Good moves, I'll take you on." As soon as Xiongqua was defeated, a skinny young man jumped onto the stage. He did not say much and attacked directly. Zhang Chuan smiled coldly. There were indeed many people who were looking for death. He had only used half of his strength when facing Xiongqua, and he still had more than 10 bottles of recovery liquid that he had not used yet. The skinny young man attacked first, but Zhang Chuan's defense was impenetrable. With his bronze arms, the skinny young man could not break through. After more than 10 moves, Zhang Chuan saw an opening and punched the skinny young man's chest. He immediately lost consciousness and was dragged out of the stage. Zhang Chuan's strength shocked the audience. Many people who wanted to go on stage gave up. This strength was not something they could shake. The third master, Yin, saw that the preparation was almost done. The hideous scar on his face wiggled a little. He smiled eerily. "Liao Hui, you go first and open up a path for Jiao. That guy's strength has shocked many people. Go and cripple him." "Yes, third master," Liao Hui responded. He tapped his foot and jumped down from the box, landing in the aisle below. He then jumped twice and landed in the center of the stage. When Zhang Chuan saw Liao Hui, his heart skipped a beat. There were not many people in Qiang City who did not know Brother Liao's name. He was a ruthless person under the third master Yin. Other than the third master Yin's box, when the big shots in the other 3 boxes saw Liao Hui coming out, their expressions changed. Ruan Jinfeng's beautiful eyebrows slightly raised, and her pair of perfectly round and slender legs under the high-slit Chongsam changed their posture. This action caused a commotion in the seats below, and dozens of pairs of lustful eyes swayed back and forth under the urging of their heads, like turtles, trying to catch the fleeting moment of beauty that was revealed when she changed her posture. Unfortunately, no matter how much they stirred, they couldn't pry into the slightest bit of secret and couldn't help but reveal a regretful expression. "Mr. Zhu, how many moves do you need to defeat Liao Hui?" Ruan Jinfeng's gentle lips let out a pleasant voice. Her voice was as pleasant as the cry of a phoenix. Replying to Miss Ruan, "If I use my full strength, I could defeat Liao Hui within 5 moves." Zhu Xiaotian put his hand behind his back and replied respectfully. While Ruan Jinfeng and Zhu Xiaotian were talking, the situation in the arena changed. Zhang Chuan, who was looking down on the crowd, was now being beaten back by Liao Hui. Bang! Liao Hui kicked Zhang Chuan's head with a high whip kick. Zhang Chuan fell down. Liao Hui raised his elbow and smashed it at Zhang Chuan's temple fiercely. Zhang Chuan tried his best to dodge. Bang! He was still hit. He avoided a fatal injury, but his chest was hit. With a crack, several of his ribs were broken. Chapter 196. Liao Hui defeated the arrogant Zhang Chuan in a few moves. Some of the strong guys in the audience also gave up the idea of going up the stage. Li Daocheng's eyes moved slightly. He said to the third master Yin in surprise, Liao Hui's strength has improved a lot since the last time he fought with me. Third master Yin hurriedly explained, this is all thanks to you, Mr. Li. After Liao Hui was injured by you, his foundation was already damaged, and he wouldn't be able to recover for at least a month. However, Mr. Li is magnanimous. Not only did you not blame us, you even personally treated Liao Hui, allowing him to benefit from a disaster. Mr. Li's ancient medical skills are truly incomparably profound. Liao Hui's physical body advanced that night, attaining spiritual muscles and jade bones, and his strength increased greatly. Li Daocheng suddenly smiled. The purity of his spiritual energy was extremely high. When he repaired Liao Hui, he also nourished his physical body a little. He didn't expect that this kid's talent was so high. After using everything, he actually broke through that night. In the other box, Ouyang Zhu's face was gloomy and cold. He almost didn't see what was happening in the ring. He kept looking at the opposite side. Huang Jiran was sitting obediently beside Li Daocheng at this time. The two of them occasionally whispered to each other, making Ouyang Zhu's jealousy burn more and more. Ouyang Zhu was polite to the third master Yin, but at this moment this thought was gone. Iron Eagle, go. Don't hold back. Kill Liao Hui. Ouyang Zhu said fiercely. Lord Zhu, don't worry. Liao Hui is not even a master. He's not my opponent, Iron Eagle said confidently. Okay. Ouyang Zhu looked at Li Daocheng viciously. Someone dared to steal his woman so blatantly. It was the first time for a young lady to get married. Ouyang Zhu couldn't swallow this anger no matter what. The teacup in his hand was crushed to pieces with a bang. If it weren't for the fact that they were in Yu Square's territory, Ouyang Zhu would have done himself. Iron Eagle, in addition to his physical skills, also practiced a kind of fast movement. Without any movement, he had already rushed out and appeared in the arena in a flash. Almost at the same time, another person went up the arena with Iron Eagle. It was Fan Hao's trump card, the Yin puppet Thunder Tiger. The two of them landed on the platform together. Liao Hui's expression remained the same. If it was a few days ago, he would still be somewhat afraid of Iron Eagle. But now, he had the confidence to compete with Iron Eagle. When Iron Eagle saw that someone actually dared to snatch the stage from him, his face revealed a displeased expression. This kind of despicable trash was troublesome to even look at. Iron Eagle coldly let out a low voice filled with spiritual source energy. Scram. Many of the tens of thousands of spectators below the stage recognized Iron Eagle and Thunder Tiger. Needless to say, Iron Eagle was a great expert of the Scarlet Sun planet's underground forces. His strength was definitely ranked in the top 5. In front of Iron Eagle, Lei, who was just an ant that could be casually squashed to death. Many pairs of eyes looked at Lei, who was about to make a fool of himself. Some people even shouted, Lei Hu, are you out of your mind, or are you out of your mind? Don't embarrass yourself. Come down quickly. In front of the Iron Eagle, Thunder Tiger, you're not a tiger. At most, you're a cat. Ha ha. The audience roared with laughter. After Lei, who became a Yin puppet, his past consciousness had disappeared into nothingness. However, it was firmly bound to Fan Hao's telekinesis. His every word and action was controlled by Fan Hao's thoughts. Fan Hao sat below the stage and turned a deaf ear to the taunts coming from all around. However, When he heard Iron Eagle's arrogant order to scram, anger rose from his feet. He moved his telekinesis and directly ordered Lei Hu to attack. In a split second, Lei Hu disappeared. Iron Eagle was stunned. "Who are you telling to scram?" Lei Hu's voice came from behind Iron Eagle. "What?" Iron Eagle's pupils suddenly widened. In shock, he turned around and clawed out. Bang! With a muffled sound, Iron Eagle's body, which had just turned halfway, suffered a heavy blow and rolled several meters away. A large hole appeared on his back, as if it had been burnt. The high-grade human rank magic robe on his body seemed to have no protection at all, as if it had been made of cotton. The jeers and taunts disappeared in a split second. The spectators below the stage watched with their mouths wide open. For a moment, they were unable to react. Before Iron Eagle could get up, Lei Hu appeared in a flash and heavily stepped on him. Bang! 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 3 consecutive kicks. Iron Eagle's back was deeply sunken. His previously confident and arrogant face was now like a dead fish. He could only exhale and not inhale. Ruan Jinfeng's charming face revealed a shocked expression. "Mr. Zhu, what is Iron Eagle's level?" Zhu Xiaoyan's hands, which had been behind his back, were now unnaturally hanging by his side. The shock in his eyes was even greater than Ruan Jinfeng's. After a pause, Zhu Xiaoyan recovered and replied, "Miss Ruan, Iron Eagle's body refining realm master. His strength is only a step away from mine." Ruan Jinfeng's face was instantly filled with shock. She thought that by bringing Mr. Zhu here, the northern region would belong to her. She did not expect that there were hidden dragons and crouching tigers in the Scarlet Sun planet's underground forces. There was actually such a strong expert. Iron Eagle can't even take one move. Then, Mr. Zhu, Ruan Jinfeng's beautiful eyes widened. She stared blankly at Iron Eagle, who was being firmly stepped on by Lei Hu. "Miss Ruan, this Lei Hu, I can't see through him. I've never heard of him before." Zhu Xiaoyan told the truth. He had already lost his sense of propriety. His self-confidence had been completely lost the moment Iron Eagle was killed. At the same time, Li Daochong frowned. He looked at Lei Hu with a strange expression. He used his mind power to scan him, but he did not find any vitality in this person. What was even stranger was that there was no death aura. Was he a zombie? Li Daochong thought, but he quickly dismissed it. A zombie should have corpse aura, but there was no corpse aura on this person. What the hell? Seeing that Iron Eagle was about to be trampled to death, Ouyang Ju suddenly stood up and shouted, "How dare you!" Iron Eagle was Ouyang Ju's confidant. How could he watch him be beaten to death? Ouyang Ju rose from the box and flew down with the spirit void flying steps. He hit Lei Hu with his palm. Bang! The 2 palms collided. Lei Hu, who was standing in the same place, did not move. Ouyang Ju, who was flying down, quickly stepped back and stabilized himself. Ouyang Ju was a student of the superclass of Qiyang University. His strength was far above the average cultivator. He had amazing talent. He had the spiritual pulse of Xian Heaven and was at the middle stage of Qi gathering. However, he was at a disadvantage when facing Lei Hu. The strength of Qiyang University represented the strongest strength of the bottom-level cultivators of Qiyang Star. After Ouyang Ju fell to the ground, his palm was numb. It was extremely painful, as if it had been burned. His hand could not stop trembling slightly. Ouyang Ju was shocked. He looked at Lei Hu with fear in his eyes. Lei Hu's gloomy face did not change. He said in a low voice, "You violated the rules, but I won't argue with you." Then Lei Hu squatted down and grabbed Iron Eagle's hair. He pulled up the dying Iron Eagle's head and said coldly, as if he was looking at a dead dog, "It's you who should get lost. Get lost." Lei Hu's hand shook, and Iron Eagle's body flew out like mud. Ouyang Ju raised his uninjured hand and grabbed Iron Eagle. He snorted and threw Iron Eagle to the medical staff of Shadow Serene Square, who had come to help. Iron Eagle had lost consciousness. It seemed that he was not going to make it. Lei Hu turned around and looked at Liao Hui. "Brother Liao, right? I heard that you're very difficult to fight. I wonder if you can take one of my punches?" Liao Hui's face was fearless, but his heart trembled for no reason. Iron Eagle's strength was above his. After being treated by Mr. Li, his strength had increased. At most, he was on par with Iron Eagle. This Lei who appeared out of nowhere was a little too strong. Liao Hui's mind was filled with the feeling he had when he faced Li Daochong a few days ago. It was a feeling of helplessness where he had no power to fight back. However, Liao Hui was ruthless. How could he be scared? Even if he could not win, he would make his opponent suffer. Liao Hui's cultivation method was called Hurricane Fist. The strongest move of this method was Tornado Storm. It had the effect of superimposing hidden strength. It could be superimposed 3 times and was very strong. Liao Hui had used this move to defeat an opponent who was much stronger than him. This time, he wanted to use it again. While Liao Hui was thinking, Lei Hu had already moved. His ghostly movements were like a ghost. It was impossible to track his movements. When Lei Hu appeared, he was already in front of Liao Hui. The latter had already gathered his strength. He roared, "Tornado Storm." Buzz! A strong wind blew in the arena. No, surrender. Li Daochong suddenly stood up from his seat to stop him. However, it was too late. Bang! Crack! There was a muffled sound, followed by the sound of broken bones. Liao Hui flew backward like a kite with a broken string. Liao Hui flew directly to the box. It was the direction of Li Daochong. Fan Hao controlled Lei Hu on purpose. He wanted to show Third Master Yin who was the boss. Liao Hui had already lost consciousness after the punch. His body shot toward the box like a cannonball. A Jiao took a step forward, wanting to catch Liao Hui, but as soon as she took a step, she was pulled back by a big hand, back to her original position. A Jiao used her true power, but the force that pulled her was just right, neither hard nor soft. A Jiao looked at Li Daochong, who had pulled her back in surprise. She saw him casually reach out his hand to catch Liao Hui's body, which had shot over like a cannonball. It was as if he was reaching out to catch a fallen leaf which had been swept by the autumn wind. Chapter 197. A Jiao wanted to say no to Li Daochong, but it was already too late. Liao Hui's body was already flying towards Lei Hu. Lei Hu's attack was shockingly powerful, turning Liao Hui into a human cannonball. Bang! However, what A Jiao imagined didn't happen. Li Daochong caught Liao Hui and turned around. An invisible force dissolved the impact of Liao Hui's attack. Li Daochong's eyes flickered as he caught Liao Hui. There was an extremely weak death aura in Liao Hui's body. If Li Daochong didn't have the hot blood upgrader, he wouldn't have been able to sense it. Li Daochong put Liao Hui down and checked his condition. He immediately transferred spiritual energy into Liao Hui's body to dissolve the death aura. Puff! Liao Hui spat out a mouthful of black blood and woke up from his coma. He looked at Li Daochong gratefully and said, "Thank you, Mr. Li." Li Daochong nodded. "Don't talk. Hurry up and circulate your energy to heal yourself. Take a rest." 2 of Third Master Yin's subordinates helped Liao Hui to the corner of the room. Liao Hui then sat down cross-legged and closed his eyes to heal himself. When Liao Hui fought with Lei Hu, he instantly felt the threat of death and thought he was going to die. For a second or two, Liao Hui was indeed on the verge of death. But soon, a pure spiritual energy entered his body, and he felt much more comfortable. After sitting down cross-legged, Liao Hui's weak eyes looked at Li Daochong's back in shock. Where did this young man come from? Not only was he ridiculously powerful, but he also knew ancient medical skills. He was simply godly. Could it be that he was a true self-cultivator? But the aura coming from his body wasn't strong at all. It seemed like he wasn't even in the chi-gathering realm. What was going on? Liao Hui was a boorish man. He couldn't figure it out, so he stopped thinking about it and started to heal himself. Third Master Yin was so angry that he clenched his teeth. Liao Hui was almost beaten to death in front of everyone. If it wasn't for Mr. Li, Liao Hui would have been crippled even if he didn't die. Third Master Yin really wanted to say some harsh words, but Lei Hu had consecutively killed Tai Ying and Liao Hui. The power he displayed was far beyond his imagination. He was afraid that no one present was his match. Moreover, Lehu did not violate the rules. The various forces had already reached a consensus before this battle. All disputes would be written off in the martial combat arena, and no grudges would be allowed to accumulate. Third Master Ian had no choice but to swallow his anger. Originally, his real trump card was Jiao, and Liao Hui was just the vanguard. Third Master Ian himself was also a body cultivator, and could be considered an expert. Naturally, he could tell that A Jiao wasn't Lehu's match. Going up on stage would just be a waste of time. At this moment, he could only keep a gloomy face and remain silent. Fan Hao had ordered Lehu to kill Liao Hui, and Lehu had done so. He had used 50% of his strength in that punch. Although he had only used half of his strength, it was more than enough to kill Liao Hui. Not only did he want to kill Liao Hui, but he also wanted to deal a heavy blow to the third Master Yin. However, Fan Hao didn't expect that Liao Hui didn't die and that third Master Yin's group didn't suffer any heavy injuries. Did Lehu go easy on him? Fan Hao looked at third Master Yin's group with surprise in his eyes. There must be something wrong with my orders. Otherwise, with Lehu's strength, even if there were 10 Liao Hui, he would still be able to smash them into pieces with one punch. Fan Hao couldn't help but feel a little regretful. However, he couldn't do it again. Once the opponent was knocked out of the arena, they would lose. They couldn't attack again. Third Master Yin, consider yourself lucky. I'll deal with you later. Fan Hao snorted coldly in his heart and immediately controlled Lehu again. At this moment, everyone in the martial combat arena had a look of fear on their faces. They looked at Lehu with fear in their eyes. Is he even human? Even a foundation establishment cultivator couldn't do much, right? The spectators in the seats were like this. The big shots in the private rooms were also bewildered. They didn't expect that today's martial combat arena would have such a scene. It was supposed to be a dispute between them, but a murderous god had appeared. The situation was suddenly out of their control. Waves rose in Wan Jinfeng's heart. She thought that Mr. Zhu would be able to suppress all the heroes and help her obtain the ownership of the northern region. In her eyes, the underground forces of planet Qiyang were just a bunch of mobs. They were a far cry from the underground forces she had encountered on a third-class cultivation planet. In another private room, the white-haired white ape's ruddy face was filled with uncertainty. The group of white ape gang members behind him looked shocked. White ape was in the body refining realm. He had broken through to the peak of the master realm some time ago. He thought that he could defeat everyone present. He didn't expect that such a fiend would appear. The white ape gang could be said to have the most complicated feelings in the crowd. This was because Lehu used to be a member of the white ape gang. He wasn't a member of the Shanghua Federation. When he was young, he was a little thief. Later on, he was wanted for committing a crime. He smuggled himself to planet Qiyang and later joined the white ape gang. At first, he wasn't bad. However, not long after, his old habits resurfaced. He even dared to steal from the gang's treasury. After he was caught, Boss Bai personally interrogated him and punished him according to the gang's rules. Lehu was whipped 36 times and almost died. He was kicked out of the gang and thrown out of the gang. They didn't expect that this kid didn't die. He relied on his tenacious vitality to survive and even joined a despicable gang like the Ghastly Puppet Sect. Who would have thought that he would become so powerful all of a sudden? Many members of the White Ape Gang had ostracized Lehu in the past. They had a grudge against him. White Ape had even slapped Lehu more than once. These things couldn't be forgotten just like that. This was especially true for those who mingled with underground forces. They had a vengeful personality. Boss Bai, this kid Lehu was only at the 5th or 6th stage of the Qi refining stage. How did he become so strong in such a short time? Iron Eagle couldn't even take a single hit from him. Doesn't that mean that Lehu has already reached the master stage? I'm worried that he'll take revenge on our White Ape gang. A shifty-eyed old man behind White Ape said worriedly. White Ape didn't want to admit Lehu's strength, but the truth was right in front of him. He had no choice but to admit it. After a moment of contemplation, he no longer hesitated. He turned to look at a middle-aged man wearing a gray robe and a mask. "Mr. Huang, my white ape gang is willing to rely on you. Please lend us a hand." The gray-robed, middle-aged man's gaze was fixed on the stunning young girl sitting next to a young man in the opposite private room. He was puzzled. Why had this girl come here? Hearing White Ape's words, the gray-robed, middle-aged man retracted his gaze and said, "If necessary, I'll lend you a hand. White Ape, although Lei Hu is powerful, you should have some confidence in yourself. With the cultivation method I gave you, as long as you don't slack off, you might not necessarily lose to Lei Hu." White Ape was just about to speak when he was interrupted by a thunderous voice. It was Lei Hu, who was looking down on everyone in the ring. "Is no one coming up?" Lei Hu stood in the middle of the ring and looked down on everyone present. For a moment, no one answered. "Ha ha ha! All of you big shots. With this little bit of ability, you dare to come up with the idea of fighting for the ownership of the North? Aren't you just giving the ownership of the North to me for free? Since you're so generous, I'll gladly accept it." Lei Hu laughed arrogantly. Many people below the ring were angry, but they didn't dare say anything. More people sighed. They didn't expect that today's martial arts competition would end up like this. "I'll take you on." A clear voice rang out. Zhu Xiaotian, who was standing beside Ruan Jinfeng, couldn't be a coward and jump onto the ring. As a reputable member of the Scarlet Sun Planet's underground forces, Lei Hu's words could easily be ignored. However, if Zhu Xiaotian didn't say anything, he would definitely be treated as a joke and called a dog in the future. Even if Zhu Xiaotian was beaten to death, he didn't want to be treated like a coward. The gray-robed middle-aged man, called Mr. Huang by White Ape, saw Zhu Xiaotian enter the arena and saw Huang Jiran approach the unfamiliar young man. His face turned ugly, and he said to White Ape, "I have a small matter to take care of. If Zhu Xiaotian loses, you go." Mr. Huang disappeared as soon as he finished speaking. In the blink of an eye, White Ape saw Mr. Huang appear outside the box. This kind of movement technique made White Ape, a body refinement realm expert, dumbfounded. However, his anxious heart calmed down. With Mr. Huang here, he didn't have to worry about Lei Hu's revenge. Li Daochong stared at Lei Hu on the ring. His expression was getting more and more hungry. The hot blood upgrader in his body was getting more and more restless. He wanted to have a big meal. Big brotherly. That Lei Hu is so scary. Huang Jiran's small hand couldn't help but grab onto Li Daochong. Bang! The box's door was kicked open without any warning. The third Master Yin and his group were all furious. That bastard dared to kick their door. They turned around and saw a gust of wind. There was no one outside the door, but there seemed to be a shadow moving. "Jiran, why are you with this group of ruffians? Go home." You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.